The gunshot echoed across the dusty Montana plain, startling a flock of crows into flight. Cole, Deadeye Blackwood, reined in his stallion at the edge of the rocky outcrop, surveying the carnage below. The bank in Silver Creek lay in shambles, smoke still rising from its shattered windows. 3 bodies sprawled on the wooden boardwalk, blood pooling beneath them in the afternoon sun. "Move out!" Jesse Mayfield shouted, stuffing the last of the cash into his saddlebags. "Sheriff's posse can't be more than 20 minutes behind us." Cole's heart hammered against his ribs as he watched his 4 companions mount up. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. The plan had been simple. In and out, no bloodshed. But Jesse had always been trigger-happy, especially since Appomattox. "You killed the teller," Cole said, voice flat, as Jesse rode up beside him. "He wasn't armed." Jesse's scarred face twisted into a sneer. "You gone soft, Deadeye war's been over 10 years. See, this ain't no different." But it was different. The teller had been young, barely 20, with terror in his eyes, as he'd raised his hands in surrender. Then Jesse had put a bullet between those eyes, without hesitation. "There was a kid in there," Cole continued, unable to shake the image of the boy hiding beneath a desk, staring up at him with those same terrified eyes. "You were going to shoot him too. And you stopped me," Jesse spat. "Could come back to haunt us all." The thunder of hooves interrupted their argument as the rest of the gang crested the ridge. "Posse's coming," shouted Liam, the youngest of their crew. "We gotta split up." Cole nodded grimly. "Head for the mountains. Meet at Widow's Pass in 3 days." As they scattered in different directions, Cole glanced back at the town once more. 10 years after Antietam, and he was still surrounded by death. Only now, he was the cause of it. 6 months later, the man who now called himself Xavier Blackwood leaned against the fence of his modest Montana ranch, watching the sunrise paint the distant peaks in shades of gold and crimson. He'd chosen this remote spot carefully, far enough from Silver Creek to avoid recognition, yet close enough to the Canadian border should a quick escape become necessary. Xavier ran a hand through his dark hair, longer now and matched by a full beard that effectively disguised the face on the wanted posters still circulating through the territory. Sometimes he barely recognized himself in the reflection of the water trough, which was precisely the point. "Cabron, the north fence won't fix itself," called Miguel Ortiz from the barn doorway. The Mexican ex-scout was the only person who knew Xavier's true identity, having found him half dead in the foothills after the disastrous bank job that left 2 of the gang dead and Jesse Mayfield bleeding out in Xavier's arms. Jesse's final words still haunted him. "My sister, Sophia, ranch near the border. She's all I got left. Promise me, Cole. Promise you'll make sure she's safe." A dying man's request sealed in blood. Xavier had nodded, not knowing if he could keep such a promise, but unwilling to deny a former brother-in-arms his final wish. Now, 6 months later, he'd yet to locate this mysterious sister. The name Mayfield wasn't uncommon in these parts, and without more specific information, finding one woman in the vastness of the Montana Territory was like hunting a specific snowflake in a blizzard. "Coming," Xavier called back to Miguel, pushing away from the fence. He'd built something resembling peace here, a small cattle operation, a sturdy cabin, and most importantly, anonymity. Each day put more distance between Cole, Deadeye Blackwood, and the man he was trying to become. As he saddled his stallion, Thunder Xavier ran through the day's tasks. The cattle needed moving to the eastern pasture, and the fence line required mending before winter set in. Simple, honest work, the kind that calloused hands and quieted minds. "I'm riding to check the north boundary," he told Miguel. "Should be back by sundown." Miguel nodded, dark eyes watchful beneath the brim of his weathered hat. Be careful, amigo. Strangers passed through Johnson's place yesterday, asking questions. Xavier's jaw tightened. What kind of questions? About new settlers, single men especially. Miguel shrugged. Could be nothing. Could be bounty hunters. Or marshals, Xavier muttered, checking his revolver before sliding it into its holster. The price on Deadeye Blackwood's head had risen to $500 after Silver Creek, dead or alive, enough to tempt many in these hard times. If I'm not back by dark, I know, Miguel interrupted. Take the strong box and ride for Canada. It was their contingency plan established the day Miguel had agreed to partner with him on the ranch. Xavier mounted up, settling into the familiar creak of leather. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. The morning air was crisp with early autumn as he rode across the rolling grassland. His property wasn't large by Montana standards, just over 200 acres, but it was good land, with a year-round creek, and enough grazing to support his small herd. In time, he hoped to expand, perhaps even build a proper house to replace the two-room cabin. Such ordinary dreams for a man who once rode with Confederate raiders, who'd later turned his sharpshooting skills to robbing stagecoaches and banks across 3 territories. Sometimes the mundanity of his new life struck him as absurd, that hands that had taken so many lives now mended fences and delivered calves. He'd reached the northern boundary where his land met the public trail when he spotted the dust cloud. A wagon approached, moving at an unusual speed for the rough terrain. Xavier reined in thunder and moved into the shelter of a copse of pines, a precaution born of hard experience. Through his field glasses he observed the scene unfolding below. A single wagon with 2 passengers, a man driving, and a woman beside him. No, not beside him. The woman appeared to be bound, her hands secured before her. As Xavier watched, the man yanked her roughly from the seat, forcing her to the ground despite her struggles. Something cold and familiar settled in Xavier's gut. He'd seen similar scenes during the war, men treating humans as property. It had sickened him then enough that he'd deserted his Virginia regiment to fight for the Union, despite his Southern roots. "Whoa, boy," he murmured to Thunder, who sensed his tension. Xavier adjusted his hat lower over his eyes and nudged the horse forward. Best to approach carefully. This could be a domestic dispute, a lawful prisoner transport, or something far more sinister. In the Montana Territory, the line between justice and lawlessness often blurred. As he descended toward the trail, rocks clattered beneath Thunder's hooves, announcing his approach. The man below looked up sharply, his hand moving to the pistol at his hip. "Fine day," Xavier called out, keeping his voice casual despite the tension coiling within him. His right hand rested near his revolver, ready, but not threatening. The man, little more than a youth, with a scraggly attempt at a beard, eyed him warily. "Ain't looking for company, mister." Drawing closer, Xavier could now see the woman clearly. Her face was partially obscured by tangled strands of honey-brown hair, but he noted the bruise darkening her cheek. When their eyes met, he was struck by the stormy blue-gray color filled with a mixture of fear and something else, pride perhaps, or defiance. "Seems your companion might disagree," Xavier remarked, nodding toward the woman. The young man's grip tightened on her arm. "She ain't got no say in the matter. She's my sister, and I'm taking her where she'll be of use, instead of a burden." Xavier dismounted slowly, movements deliberate. Up close, he could indeed see the family resemblance between them, though the woman's features were finer, more delicate. She couldn't have been more than 23. "That's so?" Xavier asked. "Most brothers I know don't tie up their sisters." The young man's face reddened. "Look, this ain't your business. I got debts to settle, And Sophia, here's my way out. Already got payment arranged in Silver Creek. The name hit Xavier like a physical blow. Sophia. Could this be Jessie Mayfield's sister? The timing seemed too convenient to be coincidence, yet the young man had claimed to be her brother. Unless— "What's your name, Miss?" Xavier addressed the woman directly. Before she could answer, her alleged brother yanked her arm. "She don't need to— Sophia!" she cut in, her voice surprisingly steady, despite her circumstances. "Sophia Mayfield." Mayfield. The confirmation sent a jolt through Xavier's spine. This had to be the woman Jessie spoke of with his dying breath. "Well, Miss Mayfield," Xavier said carefully, "seems to me you're not traveling of your own accord." "She's my kin," the brother insisted. "Name's Josiah Mayfield, and I got every right." Josiah Mayfield. Xavier's mind raced. Jessie had never mentioned a brother, only a sister. Something wasn't adding up. "No man has the right to sell another human being," Xavier interrupted, his tone hardening. "Not since the war settled that matter." Josiah's hand moved toward his pistol. "You best ride on, stranger. This don't concern you." Xavier had faced down Confederate cavalry charges and Sioux war parties. A desperate boy with trembling hands didn't rattle him. "I'm making it my concern." What happened next unfolded in seconds. Josiah drew his pistol, but Xavier was faster, years faster. His Colt cleared leather before Josiah's weapon was halfway up, and a single shot rang out. The bullet kicked up dirt at Josiah's feet, making him stumble backward and drop his gun. "Next one won't miss," Xavier warned. "Now untie your sister." Josiah's face contorted with rage and humiliation, but survival instinct prevailed. With shaking hands, he loosened the ropes around Sophia's wrists. "You're robbing me," he accused. "They paid $50 up front. I needed that money." "Then you should have found honest work," Xavier replied coldly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills. "Here's 20. More than fair for the trouble of parting ways peacefully." Josiah snatched the money, his eyes darting between Xavier and his sister. "She's nothing but trouble anyway. Got a mouth on her that won't quit." He backed toward the wagon. "You'll see. You'll regret taking her off my hands." Xavier kept his gun trained on Josiah until the young man climbed onto the wagon seat. "I suggest you don't come looking for her." "She's dead to me." Josiah spat, then snapped the reins. The wagon lurched forward, wheels grinding against the dirt road as it moved away. Only when the wagon had disappeared around a bend did Xavier holster his weapon and turn to Sophia. She stood perfectly still, rubbing her chafed wrists, her expression unreadable. "Are you hurt, Miss Mayfield?" She studied him, weariness evident in every line of her body. "Not beyond what you can see. Why did you intervene, Mr. Blackwood, Xavier Blackwood?" He removed his hat, a gesture of respect his mother had drilled into him long ago. "And I intervened because what he was doing wasn't right." Sophia's laugh was brittle. "There's plenty not right in this world, Mr. Blackwood. Most men ride on by." "I'm not most men." He replaced his hat. "My ranch is about 3 hours' ride from here. I can take you there until you decide what you want to do next. Or I can escort you to the nearest town if you prefer." Her gaze sharpened. "And what payment would you expect for this kindness?" The question stung, but Xavier understood its source. A woman alone in the West learned quickly that few offers came without expectations. "None," he said firmly. "You'll have your own quarters and be left in peace. When you're ready to move on, I'll see you safely to wherever you choose to go." Sophia looked down the empty road, then back at him. The decision was clear in her eyes before she spoke. Whatever lay behind her, the future with her brother had been worse. "Your ranch, then," she agreed, "at least until I can make other arrangements." Xavier nodded and helped her onto Thunder, then mounted behind her, keeping a respectful distance while still ensuring she wouldn't fall. As they rode away from the scene of her near sale, he couldn't help but wonder what twist of fate had placed Jessie Mayfield's sister in his path, and what secrets she might be carrying that could shatter the fragile peace he'd built. Blackwood Ranch came into view as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. Sophia had remained largely silent during their ride, answering his occasional questions with the briefest of responses. Xavier didn't push. Whatever had brought her to such desperate circumstances with her brother, she didn't owe him her story. The modest operation consisted of a main cabin, a barn, bunkhouse, and corral, with grazing lands stretching eastward to a creek that cut through the property. It wasn't much compared to the sprawling cattle empires further south, but Xavier had built it with his own hands and took quiet pride in what he'd accomplished. Miguel emerged from the barn as they approached, raising a hand in greeting before his expression shifted to curiosity at the sight of Sophia. "Boss," he called out. "Wasn't expecting you back so soon." "Change of plans," Xavier replied, dismounting before helping Sophia down. She wobbled slightly when her feet touched the ground, and he steadied her with a hand at her elbow, withdrawing the moment she was stable. This is Miss Sophia Mayfield," he announced. "She'll be staying with us for a time." Miguel nodded respectfully, though questions lingered in his dark eyes. Xavier gave him a look that promised explanation later. "You hungry, Miss Mayfield?" Xavier asked. Sophia glanced around, taking in her surroundings with caution that suggested she was accustomed to hostile environments. "Yes, but I'd appreciate a chance to wash up first, if possible." "Of course. Mrs. Cooper manages the house. She'll see to your needs." As if summoned by her name, the front door opened, and a plump woman in her 50s emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. Edith Cooper had come west after losing her husband at Shiloh, and her steady presence had been a blessing since Xavier hired her 3 years prior. "I thought I heard voices," she said, her gaze falling on Sophia with immediate concern. "Oh, my dear, you look done in." Sophia straightened, and Xavier noted how she seemed to summon dignity from nowhere, despite her disheveled appearance. "I'm quite all right, thank you." Xavier briefly explained the situation, or as much as he knew of it, while Mrs. Cooper's expression shifted from concern to outrage to motherly determination. "That brother of yours sounds like he needs a good thrashing," she declared, taking Sophia's arm. "Come along now. We'll get you cleaned up and properly fed. I've got a stew that's been simmering all day." As Mrs. Cooper led Sophia toward the house, Xavier called after them, "The blue room should be prepared." The blue room was the nicest guest room in the house, with a view of the mountains. While the women disappeared inside, Xavier tended to Thunder, removing the saddle and brushing him down. The rhythmic task gave him time to consider the implications of bringing a Mayfield to his ranch. "Pretty thing," Miguel commented, leaning against the stable door. "Trouble, I'm guessing." She needed help. "Always the night." Miguel smiled, but his eyes were serious. "Be careful. Woman running from something usually has something running after her. Her brother won't be a problem." "Brothers are not always the only problem," Miguel replied cryptically, then straightened. "We finished the north fence line. Should hold through winter now." They discussed ranch business for a while before Xavier headed to the house. When he entered, the aroma of beef stew and fresh bread greeted him. Mrs. Cooper was setting the dining table, and she gave him a pointed look. "That poor girl," she whispered. "Bruises on her arms, and not just from today. Someone's been rough with her for some time." Xavier's jaw tightened. "Her brother." She wouldn't say. Tight-lipped as a clam about her past, that one, but she's been properly raised. Has good manners despite everything. A door opened upstairs, and they fell silent as footsteps approached the staircase. When Sophia appeared, Xavier found himself momentarily speechless. Mrs. Cooper had worked a small miracle. Gone was the dust-covered, disheveled woman from the trail. In her place stood a young lady in a simple green dress, likely one of Mrs. Cooper's altered to fit her smaller frame, with her honey-brown hair washed and pinned back neatly. Without the grime of travel, her features were more pronounced: high cheekbones, a straight nose, and those stormy blue-gray eyes that seemed to evaluate everything with weary intelligence. The bruise on her cheek stood out more starkly against her clean skin, a reminder of what she'd endured. "Miss Mayfield," Xavier acknowledged with a nod, "I trust you found everything to your satisfaction." "Miss Cooper has been extremely kind," she replied, her voice soft but clear. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Blackwood." Dinner was a quiet affair at first. Sophia ate with the careful precision of someone who had known hunger but retained their manners. Mrs. Cooper kept the conversation flowing, talking about the ranch, the weather, the latest news from town, everything but Sophia's circumstances. Gradually, the young woman relaxed enough to ask questions about the property and how long Xavier had lived there. "Bought the land in '69, he answered, after spending a few years scouting for the army. Started with just 50 acres and a tent." He allowed himself a small smile. "It's grown since then." "You built all this yourself?" "Had help. Miguel's been with me almost from the start. Good men are worth their weight in gold out here." "And what about family?" The question slipped out, and Sophia immediately looked like she regretted it. "I apologize, that's not my business." "No need to apologize." Xavier set down his fork. "I was married once, briefly. Helen died of fever our first winter here." He stated the facts plainly, as he had learned to do over the years. "No children. My parents are both gone, and my younger brother died at Chancellorsville." Sophia's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry for your losses." "Life in the West takes as much as it gives," he replied. "What about you? Besides your brother, do you have family?" She stiffened almost imperceptibly. "No, my parents passed when I was 17. It's been just Josiah and me these past 5 years." The conversation lulled, and Mrs. Cooper seized the opportunity to serve apple pie, chattering about how the last of last year's stored apples had held up remarkably well. After dinner, Sophia excused herself, fatigue evident in the droop of her shoulders, despite her attempts to hide it. Mrs. Cooper showed her back to her room, returning moments later with a troubled expression. "That girl's carrying more than just her brother's mistreatment," she declared once they were alone. "Mark my words." Xavier sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "Whatever it is, it's her business to share or keep." "Always the gentleman," Mrs. Cooper sighed. "Well, I've put her in the blue room as you asked. I'll leave out some of my late daughter's things for her tomorrow. They should fit well enough with some adjustments." When Xavier finally retired to his own room, he found himself standing at the window, gazing at the stars scattered across the Montana sky. Bringing Sophia Mayfield to his ranch had been an impulsive decision, but one he couldn't regret. Whatever troubles she brought with her, they couldn't be worse than the fate her brother had planned. Still, Miguel's warning echoed in his mind. Women running from something usually had something running after them. And Xavier had enough experience to know that sometimes the most dangerous pursuits came not from without, but from within the ghosts of the past that could never be outrun. As he prepared for bed, Xavier unlocked the bottom drawer of his bureau and removed the wooden box hidden there. Inside lay Cole Blackwood's few remaining possessions, a Confederate officer's sidearm, a faded daguerreotype of his parents, and a blood-stained Bible that had belonged to Jesse Mayfield. He opened the Bible to the inscription on the flyleaf, "To my beloved husband, Jesse, may this guide you home, your devoted wife, Sophia." Xavier stared at the words, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. Not Jesse's sister, his wife, which meant that Josiah had been attempting to sell his own sister-in-law, and Xavier had just brought home the widow of the man he'd killed. "God help me," he whispered into the darkness. What had he done? The next morning dawned clear and cool, the first hint of autumn touching the air. Xavier rose with the sun, as was his habit, his mind heavy with the revelation of the previous night. Sophia Mayfield was Jesse's widow, not his sister, which complicated matters beyond measure. The Bible with its damning inscription remained locked in his bureau drawer, a secret he wasn't ready to confront. He dressed quickly and made his way to the kitchen, surprised to find Sophia already there, helping Mrs. Cooper prepare breakfast. She wore another of Mrs. Cooper's altered dresses, this one a faded blue that complemented her eyes. Her hair was pinned up neatly, revealing the graceful curve of her neck and the fading bruise on her cheek. "Miss Mayfield," he greeted her. "You needn't work while you're here." She turned from the stove, a determined set to her jaw. "I won't be a burden, Mr. Blackwood. If I'm to stay even temporarily, I'll earn my keep." There was such fierce pride in her statement that Xavier knew better than to argue. "As you wish, but don't overtax yourself." Over breakfast, he outlined his plans for the day, checking on the herd meeting with a cattle buyer from Helena, repairing fencing along the eastern boundary normal ranch business that suddenly seemed mundane when described to someone unfamiliar with his routine. "I'd like to see more of the ranch," Sophia said after he finished, "if that's permissible." "Of course, though perhaps you should rest today. Your journey was difficult." A flash of something irritation perhaps crossed her face. "I've endured worse than a hard ride, Mr. Blackwood. Fresh air would do me good." Mrs. Cooper intervened. "I could use help with the vegetable garden this afternoon. The view from there takes in most of the property." Sophia nodded, accepting the compromise. As Xavier prepared to leave, she followed him to the door. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice lowered so Mrs. Cooper couldn't hear from the kitchen, "I want you to know I don't intend to impose on your kindness for long. Once I've settled some matters, I'll move on." Xavier studied her face, noting the shadows beneath her eyes, despite her rest. "There's no rush, Miss Mayfield. Winter comes early to these mountains. It would be unwise to travel without proper preparation." She seemed about to say more, then pressed her lips together and nodded. "Thank you." As Xavier rode out with Miguel to the east pasture, the Mexican eyed him knowingly. "You have the look of a man carrying new burdens, amigo." Xavier adjusted his hat, shielding his eyes from the morning sun. "Mayfield isn't what I thought." "Few things are in this life," Miguel replied philosophically. "The señorita has secrets, yes. Don't we all?" They rode in silence for a time, checking fence posts and counting cattle. The work was methodical, allowing Xavier's mind to wander back to Silver Creek and the fateful day that had led to this impossible situation. "You're thinking of telling her," Miguel observed as they paused to rest their horses by the creek. Xavier sighed. "I made a promise to her husband as he died in my arms. A promise I didn't know I was making." "To protect his sister," Miguel nodded. "Except she's not his sister." "No, she's his widow." Xavier watched a hawk circle lazily above the grassland. "And I'm the man who killed him." Miguel whistled low. "That's a complication, my friend." I can't tell her, Xavier decided. Not yet. She's been through enough. Secrets have a way of revealing themselves at the worst possible moment, Miguel warned. Better from your mouth than discovered by accident. Xavier knew his friend was right, but the thought of watching Sophia's face transform with horror when she learned the truth was more than he could bear. For now, he would keep his silence and honor his unintentional promise to Jessie by keeping her safe. I'll tell her, he said finally, when the time is right. The cattle buyer from Helena arrived mid-afternoon, a portly man named Franklin, whose jovial manner concealed a shrewd business sense. Xavier negotiated the sale of 20 head to be delivered the following month, a good price that would see the ranch through winter comfortably. As they concluded their business on the porch, Franklin's gaze drifted to the garden, where Sophia knelt between rows of vegetables, a wide-brimmed hat shielding her from the sun. "Didn't know you had womenfolk here now, Blackwood," he commented, stroking his bushy mustache. "Wife. Guest," Xavier corrected firmly. "Miss Mayfield is staying with us temporarily." Franklin raised an eyebrow. "Relative, friend of the family," Xavier lied smoothly. The less information that circulated about Sophia, the better. "Pretty thing," Franklin observed. "Seems capable, too." Xavier nodded non-committally, eager to change the subject. "When will your men come for the cattle?" After seeing Franklin off, Xavier made his way to the garden. Sophia looked up as his shadow fell across her work, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow. "Your land is beautiful, Mr. Blackwood." "Thank you." He crouched down beside her, noting the neat piles of weeds she'd extracted. "Mrs. Cooper's put you to work, I see." "I volunteered," Sophia corrected him. "It feels good to be useful." She hesitated, then added softly, "and to be outdoors without fear." The simple statement revealed more about her previous circumstances than perhaps she intended. Xavier felt a surge of anger toward Jessie and whoever else had made her afraid of the open sky. "You're safe here." He said the words, a promise. She met his gaze directly for the first time since they'd met. "For now, but safety is rarely permanent, Mr. Blackwood." The resignation in her voice troubled him. Before he could respond, Mrs. Cooper called them for supper, and the moment passed. Days stretched into a week, and a routine emerged. Sophia helped Mrs. Cooper with household tasks in the mornings and explored the ranch in the afternoons. She was particularly drawn to the horses, and Xavier often found her by the corral watching as Miguel worked with the animals. "She knows horses," Miguel told him one evening as they checked the tack in the barn. "Asked good questions. Not a city girl, that one." Xavier had noticed the same. Beneath Sophia's careful manners lay practical knowledge of ranch life. She never complained about the early mornings or the physical work, and more than once he'd caught her gazing at the distant mountains with longing, as if they represented a freedom she craved. It was during the second week of her stay that Xavier discovered her reading in his study. Late one night he'd come down for a glass of water and noticed the lamp still burning. Sophia sat in his leather chair, a book of poetry open on her lap, so absorbed that she didn't hear him approach. "Tennyson?" he asked, recognizing the volume. She startled, nearly dropping the book. "I'm sorry. I couldn't sleep, and Mrs. Cooper mentioned you wouldn't mind if I borrowed something to read." "She's right." Xavier leaned against the doorframe. "Do you have trouble sleeping often?" Sophia carefully marked her place and closed the book. "Since I was a child, my mind wanders to troubling places." She looked away. Xavier moved to the small cabinet in the corner and poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass. He offered it to her, but she shook her head. "What brings you downstairs at this hour?" she asked. "Same as you, restless thoughts." He took a sip of the whiskey, feeling its warmth spread through his chest. Though mine usually involve cattle prices and weather patterns rather than poetry. That earned him a small smile, transforming her serious face. A practical man most of the time. He settled into the chair opposite her. Though I've been known to appreciate Tennyson on occasion. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the lamp casting golden shadows across the room. Outside, an owl hooted softly. "May I ask you something, Mr. Blackwood?" "Xavier," he corrected her. "If we're going to have midnight conversations, I think we can dispense with formalities." She hesitated, then nodded. "Xavier, then, and you may call me Sophia." "What did you want to ask Sophia?" Her fingers traced the embossed cover of the book. "Why did you really help me that day? The truth, please." Xavier considered his answer carefully, acutely aware of the need to be honest without revealing too much. "Because it was the right thing to do, but also—" He paused, surprised by his own willingness to share. "During the war, I saw too many people treated as property, fought against it. Seemed wrong to ride away when history was repeating itself right in front of me. You fought for the Union Virginia Cavalry." The words were out before he could stop them, a dangerous slip that could connect Xavier Blackwood to Cole Deadeye Blackwood if she knew enough about the wanted outlaw's background. But Sophia merely nodded, accepting this piece of his past without suspicion. "That couldn't have been easy." "Easiest decision I ever made," he countered. "Right and wrong seemed clearer then." "And now?" Sophia asked. Xavier smiled ruefully. "The West has a way of blurring those lines, but some things remain clear." He finished his whiskey. "No person should own another, not for any reason." Sophia's expression darkened. "My brother didn't see it that way. To him, I was an asset to be traded when times got hard." "What happened?" Xavier asked gently. "If you don't mind telling me." She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she spoke, her voice was distant, as if she were viewing the events through a long telescope. "After our parents died, Josiah tried to keep the farm going, but he wasn't cut out for it. Started gambling, drinking. The debts piled up." Her fingers twisted in her lap. "He'd already traded most of our possessions when a man from Silver Creek offered him a deal." "The man who paid him $50, Xavier guessed. Sophia nodded. "Vernon Stillwater, owns the largest saloon in Silver Creek. Said he needed entertainment for his establishment." Her voice turned bitter. "Josiah convinced himself it was a legitimate job offer, or pretended to. The truth is, he didn't care what happened to me as long as his debts were paid. And you had no choice but to go along." "I tried to run the night before," she admitted, touching the fading bruise on her cheek. "Josiah caught me about a mile from the farm. Said if I tried again, he'd make sure Stillwater knew I needed extra breaking in." Xavier's hand tightened around his empty glass. "I should have shot him when I had the chance." The vehemence in his voice seemed to surprise her. "Violence only creates more problems. You did the right thing." She set the book aside and stood. "I should try to sleep. Thank you for the company." As she moved toward the door, Xavier noticed for the first time a slight hesitation in her step, a protectiveness in the way she carried herself that had nothing to do with her brother's abuse. "Sophia," he called softly. She paused, but didn't turn. "Whatever you're not telling me, it doesn't change anything. You're welcome here for as long as you need." Her shoulders tensed, then relaxed on an exhaled breath. "Good night, Xavier." After she left, Xavier remained in the study, troubled by what she'd revealed and what she still kept hidden. The protective instinct she stirred in him went beyond simple compassion for someone in need. In just 2 weeks, Sophia Mayfield had become important to him in ways he wasn't prepared to examine too closely. The autumn days grew shorter, and the nights carried the bite of approaching winter. September gave way to October, bringing the first dusting of snow to the highest peaks. Sophia had been at Blackwood Ranch for nearly a month, and her presence had become a natural part of daily life. Mrs. Cooper clearly enjoyed having another woman in the house and had taken to teaching Sophia her recipes and remedies. Even Miguel and the ranch hands had grown accustomed to her tipping their hats respectfully when she passed, and sometimes lingering after dinner to hear her read aloud from Xavier's collection of books. Xavier himself found his days brightened by small moments Sophia's laughter, when one of the barn kittens pounced on her skirt the way she hummed softly while hanging laundry, her thoughtful questions about ranch operations. He began inviting her to ride with him in the afternoons, showing her the furthest reaches of his property. During these rides, they talked. Xavier told her about his dreams for the ranch, the herd he was carefully breeding for strength and resilience, his plans to expand toward the western ridge once he saved enough to purchase the adjacent property. Sophia spoke of her childhood on a small farm in Missouri, her mother's garden that had bloomed with flowers, as well as vegetables, the books her father had ordered specially from St. Louis, because she'd read through everything in the small-town library. She carefully avoided mention of recent years, and Jesse and Xavier didn't press guilt, stopping his tongue whenever he considered asking about her late husband. It was during one such ride, as they paused atop a hill overlooking a meadow, where part of the herd grazed, that Xavier noticed Sophia wincing as she shifted in her saddle. "Are you in pain?" he asked, concern edging his voice. She straightened clearly, trying to mask her discomfort. "It's nothing, just stiff from yesterday's work in the garden." Xavier wasn't convinced. "Mrs. Cooper mentioned you refused breakfast this morning. Are you unwell?" "I wasn't hungry, that's all." Sophia's tone held a defensiveness that suggested there was more to the story. She gazed out over the meadow, the October wind tugging at tendrils of hair that had escaped her pins. "I need to tell you something," she finally said, her hands tight on the reins, "about why I can't stay much longer." Xavier felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He'd known this conversation was coming, but that didn't make it any easier. "You don't owe me explanations." "I do," she insisted. "You've been kinder than anyone had reason to be, and I've not been entirely honest." He waited, giving her the space to continue at her own pace. The October wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of pine and distant snow. Sophia took a deep breath. "I'm with child." The words hung in the crisp air between them. Xavier kept his expression carefully neutral, though his mind raced with implications. "I see." "No, you don't," she said quickly. "It's not what you're thinking." "I wasn't," she swallowed hard. "There was someone. Before Josiah's gambling got out of hand, we were to be married." "What happened to him?" Xavier asked gently, though he suspected the answer involved Jesse Mayfield. Sophia's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "Robert was a surveyor for the railroad. There was an accident, a blasting charge that detonated too soon. He died 3 months ago." Her hand moved unconsciously to her abdomen, still flat beneath her riding skirt. "I didn't know I was carrying his child until after he was gone." "And your brother didn't care, except that it complicated his plans to sell you." Her laugh was hollow. "Stillwater wasn't interested in a pregnant woman, but Josiah convinced him I wouldn't start showing for a few more months. Said he could get plenty of use out of me before then." She shuddered. "When the baby came, they'd likely have given it away. Or worse." Xavier's hand tightened on his saddle horn, rage building at the callousness of such men. "The baby is why you need to leave." Sophia finally looked at him directly. A woman in my condition, unmarried and without family support, there are few options. She hesitated. I've been saving the money you've insisted on paying me for my work. Once I have enough, I plan to go to Denver. I've heard there are charitable homes there for women in my situation. The thought of Sophia alone in a strange city at the mercy of strangers' charity sent a chill through Xavier that had nothing to do with the autumn wind. And the child, pain flashed across her face. Most such homes require that the baby be given up for adoption to a proper family. It's the price of their assistance. Xavier watched a hawk circle lazily above the meadow, taking his time to formulate his response. When he finally spoke, he surprised himself with the certainty in his voice. You don't have to go to Denver. Sophia frowned. I can't impose on your kindness indefinitely. Once I begin to show, marry me. The words hung between them, as unexpected as a summer snowfall. Sophia's eyes widened in shock. What did you say? Xavier turned in his saddle to face her fully. Marry me. Stay here at the ranch. He continued before she could interrupt. Your child would have a name, a home security. You can't possibly mean that, she whispered. You barely know me. I know enough, he countered. I know you're strong, intelligent kind. I know you work hard and care deeply. I know you deserve better than what life has handed you. But marriage, that's... Why would you offer such a thing? Xavier considered his motivations carefully. Because I respect you, Sophia. Because I believe every child deserves a chance at a good life. Because this ranch, for all its beauty, has been a lonely place since Helen died. He paused. I'm not proposing love, but partnership, friendship, a chance for both of us to build something meaningful. Sophia stared at him, clearly struggling to process his offer. You would raise another man's child as your own. I would raise a child who needs a father, Xavier corrected. The circumstances of their conception don't matter to me. She turned away, gazing out over the land that stretched before them. You're asking me to make a decision that will affect the rest of my life and yours based on a month's acquaintance. I'm offering you a choice, Xavier said quietly. Something it sounds like you've had precious little of lately. Take time to consider it. The offer stands regardless of your answer. Sophia nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. I will think on it. They rode back to the ranch in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As they approached the barn, Xavier noticed how naturally Sophia fit into the landscape of his life. The ease with which she dismounted and tended to her horse, the way she greeted Miguel with a warm smile, her gentle pat for the barn cat that twined around her ankles. He had spoken truthfully about his reasons for proposing, but he hadn't voiced the most compelling one. In the short time she'd been at Blackwood Ranch, Sophia Mayfield had awakened feelings he'd thought long buried with his wife. Not just attraction, though she was undeniably beautiful, but a deeper connection that had grown through their conversations and shared moments. Xavier was not a man given to impulsive decisions, but neither was he one to ignore the promptings of his conscience or his heart. Whatever Sophia decided, he knew he would not regret making the offer. That evening, Mrs. Cooper served a hearty stew with dumplings, chattering about the need to put up more preserves before the first heavy snow. Sophia was quieter than usual, responding to questions but offering little conversation of her own. Xavier didn't press her understanding she needed space to consider his proposal. After dinner, he retreated to his study to review the ranch accounts while Sophia helped Mrs. Cooper with the dishes. Later, he heard the housekeeper bid Sophia good night and climb the stairs to her own room. But the expected sound of Sophia's lighter footsteps didn't follow. Just as he was considering whether to seek her out, a soft knock came at the study door. Sophia stood there, her face composed, but her eyes reflecting inner turmoil. "May I speak with you?" she asked. "Of course." Xavier set aside his ledger and gestured to the chair across from him. "Would you like some tea? Or something stronger?" She shook her head and perched on the edge of the chair, hands twisting in her lap. "I've been thinking about your offer." Xavier waited, giving her time to gather her thoughts. "It's generous beyond measure," she began. "But I have to ask, wouldn't you resent it eventually? Taking on another man's child, a woman you didn't choose out of love." Xavier leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Sophia, I've spent 10 years building this ranch, creating something lasting. But what's the point of it all without someone to share it with, to pass it on to?" He paused. "As for love, I believe it can grow from respect and shared purpose. I'm not offering you a cold business arrangement." "You hardly know me," she repeated her earlier objection. "I could be difficult, disagreeable." A smile tugged at his lips. "I've seen your temper when Miguel's dog stole your washing. I think I can handle difficult." That earned him a small laugh, but she quickly sobered. "People would talk. They'd calculate the timing once the baby comes." "Let them talk," Xavier said dismissively. "This is my land. Anyone who works for me knows better than to spread gossip." Sophia stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the starlit ranch yard. "When Robert died, I thought any chance at a normal life died with him. Then, when Josiah—" She swallowed hard. "I've been so focused on survival that happiness seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford to consider." Xavier remained silent, giving her space to work through her thoughts. "If I accept," she said, finally turning to face him, "I want to be clear about something." "Go on." "I won't be a charity case or an obligation. I would expect to be a true partner in this ranch, to work alongside you, to have a voice in decisions." "I would expect nothing less," Xavier assured her. "And the child would be raised as yours. In every way, no distinctions or reminders of their birth." "On my honor," he promised solemnly. Sophia took a deep breath. "Then, yes, Xavier Blackwood, I will marry you." The simple acceptance sent a surge of unexpected joy through him. He stood and crossed to her, taking her hands in his. They were small but strong, marked by the work she'd willingly taken on since coming to the ranch. "Thank you for trusting me," he said quietly. "Thank you for offering hope," she replied, her voice steady, despite the sheen of tears in her eyes. They stood there for a moment, hands clasped, the first tentative foundation of their partnership laid between them. Xavier resisted the urge to pull her closer, knowing she needed time to adjust to this new future they were building. "We should tell Mrs. Cooper in the morning," he said finally. "She'll be thrilled. She's been not so subtly suggesting I find a wife for years." Sophia's smile was genuine, if a bit tremulous. "She's a good woman. I hope I can live up to her expectations." "You already have," Xavier assured her. The news of their engagement spread quickly through the small ranch community. Mrs. Cooper, as Xavier had predicted, was ecstatic, immediately launching into plans for the ceremony and preparations for making the house more suitable for a proper family, as she put it. Miguel offered quiet congratulations, though Xavier caught his friend watching Sophia with thoughtful eyes when she wasn't looking. The other hands were more overtly curious, but a stern word from Xavier ensured their questions remained unasked. Xavier rode into the nearest town, Silver Falls, the following day to speak with the circuit preacher about performing the ceremony. Reverend Parker, a graying man with kind eyes who visited the outlying ranches every 6 weeks, agreed to marry them during his next circuit in mid-November. "Rather sudden, isn't it?" the Reverend commented mildly. "Don't believe I've heard mention of Miss Mayfield before." "Life in the West moves at its own pace, Reverend," Xavier replied evenly. "When you know something's right, there is little sense in delay." The older man studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. I'll be at Blackwood Ranch on the 15th. Will you be wanting a large celebration?" "Simple is best," Xavier said. "Just the ranch hands and perhaps a few neighbors." As he prepared to leave town, a familiar voice called out to him from the doorway of the general store. "Blackwood herd, you're finally getting hitched." Daniel Foster, owner of the neighboring Twin Pines Ranch, strode toward him with an outstretched hand. They'd been friendly competitors and occasional drinking companions since Xavier had established his ranch. "News travels fast," Xavier observed, shaking Foster's hand. "Small town," Foster grinned. "Mrs. Winslow at the Mercantile said you ordered extra supplies and mentioned a wedding. Who's the lucky lady?" Xavier hesitated, but knew concealment would only feed gossip. "Her name is Sophia Mayfield. She's been staying at the ranch for about a month now." Foster's eyebrows rose. "Quick work even for frontier standards." "When it's right, it's right," Xavier echoed his words to the Reverend. "Well, congratulations!" Foster clapped him on the shoulder. "Emily will be delighted to hear it. You must bring your bride to dinner once you're settled. God knows there are few enough ladies out here for proper society." Xavier nodded, though the thought of subjecting Sophia to the curiosity of neighbors made him uneasy. "We'll see. It may be a while before we're making social calls." Of course," Foster winked knowingly. "Newlyweds need their privacy." As Xavier turned to mount his horse, he caught sight of a familiar figure exiting the saloon across the street. Caldwell, the Silver Creek sheriff. A man known more for his willingness to look the other way than his dedication to the law. Xavier pulled his hat lower, turning his face away. The last thing he needed was for the sheriff to recognize him from wanted posters. Too late. Caldwell had spotted him and was crossing the dusty main street with purposeful strides. "You there," he called out. "Blackwood, isn't it?" Xavier steeled himself, facing the lawman with practiced composure. "Sheriff, what brings you to Silver Falls?" "Business," Caldwell replied vaguely, his shrewd eyes taking in Xavier's appearance. "Heard you've got a new woman out at your place." A cold knot formed in Xavier's stomach. "News does travel fast." "Description matches a woman I'm looking for," Caldwell continued. "Honey brown hair, blue-gray eyes, about 23. Goes by the name of Sophia Mayfield." Xavier kept his expression neutral, despite his racing heart. "What's your interest in her?" "Her brother Josiah's been making noise in Silver Creek. Claims she was taken against her will." Caldwell's gaze remained fixed on Xavier's face, watching for any reaction. "Says a stranger interfered in a legitimate business transaction." "If you're referring to the sale of a human being to Vernon Stillwater, I wouldn't call that legitimate," Xavier replied coldly. Caldwell's eyes narrowed. "So it was you." "I prevented a crime." Xavier met the sheriff's gaze steadily. "Miss Mayfield is now my fiancée, soon to be my wife. She's under my protection." "Protection?" Caldwell repeated with a humorless smile. "Stillwater's not a man who forgets a debt, or forgives interference." "Is that a threat, Sheriff?" "Just an observation." Caldwell adjusted his badge. "I'll be paying a visit to your ranch soon. Official business." Xavier's hand drifted toward his holstered revolver. "We'll be expecting you." As Caldwell walked away, Xavier mounted quickly, eager to return to the ranch and warn Sophia. The confrontation had confirmed his worst fears. Stillwater was not going to let the matter drop easily, and with the local law in his pocket, their situation had just become considerably more dangerous. The peaceful life Xavier had built at Blackwood Ranch was about to be tested, and the ghosts of Cole Blackwood's past were drawing ever closer. Xavier pushed Thunder hard on the ride back to the ranch, his mind racing with the implications of Sheriff Caldwell's thinly veiled threat. The lawman's connection to Stillwater complicated matters significantly. No longer was this simply about a woman escaping an abusive situation, but about powerful men whose pride and profits had been wounded. The sun was setting by the time he reached the ranch, casting long shadows across the yard. Miguel emerged from the barn as Xavier dismounted, immediately sensing his friend's tension. "Trouble?" the Mexican asked quietly, taking Thunder's reins. "Caldwell," Xavier replied grimly. "He's looking for Sophia. Says he'll be paying us a visit soon." Miguel's weathered face hardened. "Stillwater's dog. We should prepare." Xavier nodded. "Check our ammunition supplies, and tell the men to keep their eyes open for strangers." Inside the house, he found Sophia and Mrs. Cooper in the kitchen preparing dinner. The domestic scene, Sophia with flour on her cheek, learning to make biscuits under Mrs. Cooper's watchful eye, struck him with its fragile normalcy. In another life, this might have been an ordinary evening unmarred by threats and secrets. "You're back early," Sophia observed, looking up with a smile that faded when she saw his expression. "What's happened?" Mrs. Cooper, sensing the tension, discreetly excused herself to fetch something from the root cellar, leaving them alone. "I ran into Sheriff Caldwell in Silver Falls," Xavier explained, keeping his voice low. "He's looking for you. Says Josiah's been claiming you were taken against your will." The color drained from Sophia's face. "Josiah wouldn't dare. He knows what would happen if I told the truth about what he tried to do." "It's not Josiah I'm worried about," Xavier said. "It's Vernon Stillwater. The sheriff made it clear he's working for Stillwater, and they're not happy about losing their investment." Sophia's hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. "What does this mean? Do we need to leave?" "No," Xavier said firmly. "This is our home. We're not running." He moved closer, gently placing his hands over hers. "But I need you to know that Caldwell will be coming here asking questions. We need to be prepared." "What will you tell him? The truth or most of it? That you're my fiancé, that I prevented Josiah from selling you to Stillwater, and that you're staying here of your own free will?" Sophia nodded slowly, her composure returning. "And when he asks about the baby, we say it's mine," Xavier replied without hesitation, "that we've known each other longer than people realize." "A lie, a necessary one," he countered, "for the child's protection." Sophia studied his face for a long moment. "You would claim another man's child as your own, even to the law. I told you before I would raise a child who needs a father. That includes protecting them, however necessary." Something shifted in Sophia's expression, a deepening of trust, perhaps, or a new understanding of the man she'd agreed to marry. "Thank you," she said simply. Mrs. Cooper returned her sharp eyes, taking in their serious expressions. "I take it the trip to town didn't go as planned." Xavier briefly explained the situation, knowing the older woman's discretion was beyond question. Her mouth set in a firm line as she listened. "That Caldwell's been in Stillwater's pocket for years," she said when he finished. "Everyone knows it, but nobody says it." "We need to be ready when he comes," Xavier emphasized. "Well," Mrs. Cooper declared, wiping her hands on her apron, "let him come. He'll find nothing here but a decent ranch family preparing for a wedding. And if he thinks otherwise, he can take it up with my rolling pin." Despite the gravity of the situation, Sophia laughed, the sound breaking the tension in the room. Xavier found himself smiling, too grateful for Mrs. Cooper's stalwart support. "Now," the older woman continued, "let's have dinner. No sense facing troubles on an empty stomach." That night, Xavier lay awake long after the house had fallen silent, listening to the wind rattling the window panes. The encounter with Caldwell had unsettled him more than he cared to admit, not just for the immediate threat it posed to Sophia, but for the risk of exposure it created for him. If Caldwell started digging, how long before he connected Xavier Blackwood to the wanted outlaw, Cole Deadeye Blackwood? The physical resemblance was there despite the beard and longer hair, and with a U.S. Marshal's bulletin likely in every sheriff's office in the territory, it wouldn't take much to raise suspicions. Xavier slipped out of bed and moved to the window, gazing at the moonlit landscape of his ranch. He'd built something here, something good and honest. The irony wasn't lost on him that it had taken a life of violence and crime to teach him the value of peace. A soft knock at his door pulled him from his thoughts. He opened it to find Sophia standing in the hallway, wrapped in a shawl over her nightgown. "I saw the light under your door," she explained. "I couldn't sleep either." Xavier stepped back, allowing her to enter. It was improper, of course, an unmarried woman in a man's bedroom at night, but propriety seemed a distant concern, given their circumstances. "I keep thinking about what happens if Caldwell takes me back to Silver Creek," Sophia said, moving to warm her hands by the small fire still burning in the grate. "That won't happen," Xavier assured her. "I won't let it." She turned to face him, the firelight illuminating half her face, while leaving the other in shadow. "You can't stop a sheriff, Xavier. Not without becoming an outlaw yourself." The words hit closer to home than she could know. "There are legal ways to fight this. You've committed no crime. In the eyes of men like Stillwater and Caldwell, I have," she countered. "I've denied them what they believe is rightfully theirs." Her hand moved unconsciously to her abdomen, where the slight swell of her pregnancy was just becoming visible beneath her nightgown. "And I'm carrying something precious that they would destroy without a second thought." Xavier crossed the room to stand before her. "Listen to me, Sophia. I made you a promise that you and your child would be safe here. I intend to keep that promise, whatever it takes." "Even if it means risking everything you've built?" she asked, studying his face in the flickering light. "Even then," he confirmed without hesitation. Sophia's expression softened. She reached up her fingers, lightly touching the scar that ran along his jaw, a remnant from a Confederate saber during the war. "You're a good man, Xavier Blackwood. Better than I deserve." "No," he said quietly. "Better than I deserve." Something unspoken passed between them in that moment, a connection that transcended their arrangement, their shared predicament. Sophia rose on tiptoe and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. "Good night," she whispered, then slipped from the room like a ghost, leaving Xavier with the lingering warmth of her lips against his skin and the weight of his unspoken secrets heavy on his heart. The following days passed in a state of heightened vigilance. Xavier positioned the ranch hands strategically around the property. Miguel taught Sophia how to use a small derringer for self-defense, and Mrs. Cooper prepared the house as if for a siege, canning extra food and checking their medical supplies. Through it all, wedding preparations continued. The simple ceremony Xavier had envisioned grew slightly as neighbors heard the news and expressed interest in attending. Mrs. Cooper altered one of her late daughter's dresses for Sophia, a cream-colored gown with delicate lace trim that transformed her from ranch hand to bride. 5 days after Xavier's confrontation with Caldwell, the sheriff finally arrived. Xavier was checking the livestock in the north pasture when one of the hands rode up at a gallop. "Boss Sheriff's here with 2 deputies. They're at the house." Xavier's blood ran cold. Sophia. Inside with Mrs. Cooper. Miguel's on the porch, keeping watch. Xavier swung onto Thunder's back, digging his heels into the stallion's flanks. The horse responded instantly, surging forward at a gallop. As he crested the rise that overlooked the ranch, Xavier could see 3 horses hitched outside the house and 3 men standing on the porch facing Miguel. He slowed Thunder to a trot as he approached, not wanting to appear anxious or aggressive. Sheriff Caldwell turned at the sound of hoofbeats, a satisfied smile spreading across his weathered face. "Mr. Blackwood," he called out. "Just the man we were hoping to see." Xavier dismounted, handing Thunder's reins to one of the hands who had followed him back. He approached the porch with measured steps, noting that both deputies had their hands resting near their holsters. "Sheriff," he acknowledged, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" Caldwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Official business. We're looking for a Miss Sophia Mayfield, believed to be in your custody." "Miss Mayfield is my fiancée," Xavier corrected. "And she's here of her own free will." "Well, that's not what her brother claims," Caldwell countered. "Says you abducted her at gunpoint, threatened his life." Xavier maintained his composure despite the fury building within him. "Her brother was attempting to sell her to Vernon Stillwater. I intervened as any decent man would." "Serious accusation," Caldwell observed. "Mr. Stillwater is a respected businessman in Silver Creek." "A respectable businessman who deals in flesh," Xavier challenged. I doubt the territorial governor would agree." A flash of anger crossed Caldwell's face. "Watch yourself, Blackwood. Making accusations against prominent citizens can lead to trouble." "So can abducting women," Xavier replied evenly, "which is why Miss Mayfield is staying right here. If you wish to speak with her, you're welcome to do so in my presence." Before Caldwell could respond, the front door opened and Sophia stepped onto the porch. She had dressed carefully in one of her modest day dresses, her hair neatly pinned up, presenting the very image of a respectable rancher's fiancée. "Sheriff Caldwell," she greeted him with remarkable composure. "I understand you have questions about my situation." Caldwell removed his hat, his demeanor shifting to false politeness. "Miss Mayfield, your brother is mighty concerned about your welfare." "My brother sold me like cattle," Sophia replied coolly. "His concern extends only to the money he lost when Mr. Blackwood rescued me." "Rescued?" Caldwell raised an eyebrow. "That's not how Josiah tells it." "I'm not surprised. Josiah has always had a tenuous relationship with the truth, especially when money is involved." Sophia moved to stand beside Xavier, her shoulder brushing against his arm in a subtle show of unity. "I am here voluntarily, Sheriff. Mr. Blackwood and I are to be married next week. You're welcome to attend the ceremony if you'd like proof of my willingness." The sheriff studied her for a long moment, clearly searching for signs of coercion. Finding none, he shifted tactics. "Your brother mentioned something else interesting. Said you might be in a delicate condition. One that couldn't possibly be the responsibility of Mr. Blackwood here, given how recently you met." Xavier tensed, but Sophia didn't flinch. "My personal matters are none of your concern, Sheriff. But since you seem determined to pry, yes, I am expecting a child. Xavier's child conceived during a visit to Missouri earlier this year." The lie flowed from her lips with such conviction that Xavier almost believed it himself. Sophia continued, her voice steady. "We had planned to marry in the spring, but circumstances accelerated our timeline. Now is there anything else, or may we return to our preparations?" Caldwell's eyes narrowed. He clearly hadn't expected such a composed and plausible response. "There's still the matter of the gun Mr. Blackwood pulled on your brother." "To prevent a kidnapping," Sophia countered. "Would you have preferred he stand by and allow a woman to be sold into servitude?" One of the deputies shifted uncomfortably, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Caldwell noticed and scowled. "Well, seems you've got an answer for everything, Miss Mayfield." He replaced his hat. "But this matter isn't settled, not by a long shot." His gaze shifted to Xavier. "Stillwater doesn't take kindly to interference, Blackwood. And neither do I." "Is that a threat, Sheriff?" Xavier asked quietly. "Just a friendly warning," Caldwell replied. "Things happen out here in the wilds. Fires, rustlers, accidents. Would be a shame if your wedding had to be postponed due to unforeseen circumstances." Miguel stepped forward, his hand drifting toward the knife at his belt. Xavier subtly shook his head, stopping his friend from escalating the situation. "We appreciate your concern for our safety," Xavier said evenly. "Rest assured we keep a close watch on our property." Caldwell smirked. "You do that. We'll be seeing you again real soon." With that, the sheriff and his deputies mounted up and rode away, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. "That went better than expected," Miguel observed once the riders were out of earshot. "Don't be fooled," Xavier replied, watching the dust cloud recede. "This was just the opening move." Sophia released a shaky breath, her composure finally cracking. "He didn't believe me, did he?" "No," Xavier admitted. "But he didn't have cause to take you either. For now, that's enough." Mrs. Cooper emerged from the house, her face tight with concern. "Those men have trouble written all over them. What do we do now?" Xavier turned to face them all, his makeshift family now under threat because of his actions. "We prepare. The wedding goes ahead as planned. But from this moment on, no one goes anywhere alone, and we keep armed guards on watch, day and night." "You think they'll come back with force?" Sophia asked, her hand instinctively moving to protect her unborn child. "I think Stillwater has too much pride to let this go," Xavier replied. "And Caldwell is his willing instrument." "There's something else," Miguel said quietly. "Something about the sheriff. The way he looked at you, Jefe, like he was trying to place your face." The observation confirmed Xavier's own unease. All the more reason to be vigilant. As they moved inside to discuss security arrangements, Xavier couldn't shake the feeling that their time was running short. The past he'd tried so hard to escape was circling ever closer, threatening everything and everyone he had come to cherish. That night, as a precaution, Xavier moved his bedroll to the floor outside Sophia's room, determined that no one would reach her without going through him first. He was just settling in when her door opened. "This isn't necessary," she said softly, looking down at him in the dim lamplight. "You need proper rest." "I'll rest when I know you're safe," he replied. Sophia hesitated, then said, "At least come inside where it's warmer. The chair by the window is comfortable enough." Xavier knew he should refuse. Propriety demanded it, but practicality won out. Her room offered better defensive positioning with clear sight lines to both the staircase and the window that overlooked the yard. Inside, Sophia had already prepared the armchair with a blanket and pillow. She was dressed in a modest nightgown, her hair braided for sleep. "Thank you," he said, settling into the chair. "I'll try not to disturb your rest." Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, regarding him thoughtfully. "You've done so much for me, risked so much. I don't understand why." Xavier considered his response carefully. "I told you before it was the right thing to do." "There's more to it," she pressed gently. "Something personal. I can see it in your eyes sometimes, like you're carrying a burden you can't put down." He looked away, unable to meet her penetrating gaze. "We all have our ghosts, Sophia." "Yes," she agreed. "We do. Some nights I still dream of Jesse. The name hung in the air between them, and Xavier froze. Had she discovered the truth somehow? My husband, she clarified, misinterpreting his tension. Not my brother, as Josiah claimed. Relief washed over him quickly, followed by guilt. You were married. Sophia nodded, her fingers twisting the simple gold band she wore on a chain around her neck, a detail Xavier had noticed but never questioned. For nearly 2 years, Jesse Mayfield was charming, handsome, and completely reckless. A sad smile touched her lips. We met when I was teaching at a small school in Missouri. He swept me off my feet with grand dreams and promises of adventure. Xavier remained silent, heart pounding, as Sophia unknowingly spoke of the man he had killed. I didn't realize until after we were married that his business dealings were often less than legitimate, she continued. He would disappear for weeks at a time, then return with money and gifts, never explaining where they came from. Her voice dropped lower. I suspected, of course, but I loved him, and I believed he would change once we started a family. What happened to him? Xavier forced himself to ask, knowing he needed to hear her version. Sophia's eyes clouded with grief. He joined a gang for one last job that would set us up for life. There was a bank robbery in Silver Creek. It went wrong. Jesse was shot. Her hand moved to her abdomen. He never knew about the baby. The familiar weight of guilt pressed down on Xavier. Here was the truth he'd been avoiding. Jesse Mayfield hadn't been Sophia's brother, but her husband. And Xavier hadn't just witnessed his death. He had caused it. The night Jesse died replayed in his mind. They'd split up after the robbery, Jesse bleeding heavily from a posse member's lucky shot. Xavier had found him collapsed in a ravine, blood soaking through his shirt. Cole? Jesse had gasped, using Xavier's real name. You came back. Couldn't leave a man behind, Xavier had replied, trying to stem the bleeding from the wound in Jesse's side. But it was too late. The bullet had found its mark too well. As Jesse's life ebbed away, he'd gripped Xavier's arm with surprising strength. My sister, he'd whispered. Sophia, ranch near the border, all I got left. Promise me, Cole. Promise. Only it hadn't been his sister. It had been his wife. And in his dying delirium, Jesse had either confused his words or deliberately lied, perhaps, to ensure Xavier would help her. Xavier! Sophia's voice pulled him back to the present. Are you all right? You look pale. He forced himself to meet her gaze, knowing he was dangerously close to revealing everything. Just tired, he managed. And I'm sorry about your husband. You deserved better. Perhaps, she said softly. But then I wouldn't be here now, would I? Sometimes our greatest sorrows lead us to unexpected blessings. Her hand reached out, briefly touching his. Get some rest. Tomorrow will bring challenges enough. As Sophia extinguished the lamp and settled into bed, Xavier remained rigid in the chair, his thoughts in turmoil. Every instinct told him to confess the truth, that he had been there when Jesse died, that he knew more than he'd admitted. But fear held his tongue. Fear that the fragile trust between them would shatter, fear that she would look at him with horror when she learned who he truly was. So he sat in silence, keeping watch through the long Montana night, a sentinel against dangers both external and internal, guarding Sophia not just from Caldwell and Stillwater, but from the devastating truth about the man who had appointed himself her protector. Dawn broke with an ominous red glow that seasoned ranchers knew portended a change in weather. Xavier, who had dozed fitfully in the chair, rose to check the window and saw heavy clouds gathering on the western horizon. Storm coming, he murmured. Sophia stirred, opening her eyes. For a moment, confusion crossed her face at finding him in her room. Then memory returned and she sat up. "Did you sleep at all?" "Enough," he lied, rolling his stiff shoulders. "You're a terrible liar, Xavier Blackwood," she said with a small smile, then sobered. "Any sign of trouble?" "Not yet, but that doesn't mean it isn't coming." After breakfast, Xavier gathered the ranch hands and outlined increased security measures. Miguel would take charge of organizing watches, ensuring the ranch was protected around the clock. The men listened solemnly, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Anybody not comfortable with this should say so now," Xavier concluded. "This isn't what you signed on for, and I'll understand if you want to leave until things settle." To his gratitude, not a single hand raised the option. Tom, the youngest worker, spoke up. "Begging your pardon, boss, but Miss Sophia's one of us now. We protect our own." A murmur of agreement rose from the men. Xavier nodded, throat tight with unexpected emotion. "Thank you, all of you." As the men dispersed to their duties, Miguel approached. "I sent riders to check the perimeter. All quiet so far." "Good. Double the night watch, especially near the house." "Already done." Miguel hesitated, then added, "There's something else, Jefe. One of the hands saw a stranger watching the ranch yesterday from the ridge to the east. When Tom rode out to investigate, the man was gone." Xavier's jaw tightened. "Scout or lookout?" "Could be either. Could be nothing, just a traveler passing through. We can't take that chance. Send someone to check that ridge regularly." As they discussed further security arrangements, a commotion arose from the yard. Xavier hurried outside to find one of the hands supporting a bleeding, exhausted man, a stranger whose clothes were torn and mud-spattered. "Found him collapsed by the creek," the hand explained. "Says he needs to talk to you. Urgent." Xavier approached cautiously, his hand near his holster. The man looked up, his face haggard and unfamiliar. "Blackwood," he rasped. "Xavier Blackwood." "That's me. Who's asking?" The man swallowed painfully. "Name's Harris. I was a deputy in Silver Creek." Xavier tensed. "Caldwell's man, not anymore." Harris grimaced, revealing a bloody gash on his side. "They'll kill me for this, but you need to know. Stillwater's planning to burn you out. Tonight." A chill ran down Xavier's spine. "How do you know this?" "Overheard them planning. Caldwell's deputized 20 men, not legal deputies, just Stillwater's thugs with badges." Harris coughed weakly. "They aim to come after midnight. Fire the outbuildings first, drive you out of the house, then take the woman." "And you?" Xavier asked suspiciously. "Why warn us?" Harris's eyes flickered with shame. "I've done things I'm not proud of working for Caldwell, but selling women, burning homes with people inside, there's a line, even for me." Xavier studied the man, weighing his words against his obvious injuries. Either Harris was telling the truth, or this was an elaborate ruse to get inside their defenses. Miguel voiced the thought. "Could be a trap, Jefe. Send a wounded man for sympathy, get us to lower our guard." "If I wanted to trap you," Harris countered weakly, "I'd have come with a better story than 20 armed men attacking at midnight." The logic was sound. Xavier made his decision. "Get him inside. Mrs. Cooper can tend his wounds while we decide what to do with him." And as Harris was helped toward the house, Xavier caught sight of Sophia watching from the porch, her face pale with concern. He joined her, keeping his voice low. "You heard?" She nodded. "If what he says is true, we need to leave. Now. This is my fight, not yours." "It became my fight the moment I stopped Josiah on that road," Xavier replied firmly. And I don't run from bullies, Sophia. Not anymore. Before she could argue further, the thunder of approaching hooves drew their attention. A single rider was galloping toward the ranch at breakneck speed. "Miguel!" Xavier called sharply. "Rifles!" The Mexican was already moving, distributing weapons to the hands who took up defensive positions around the yard. Xavier pushed Sophia toward the door. "Get inside. Stay with Mrs. Cooper." For once, she didn't argue, hurrying into the house as Xavier stepped off the porch, rifle in hand. As the rider drew closer, Xavier recognized the lanky figure of young Tom, who had been sent to town for supplies that morning. Tom reined in his lathered horse, his face ashen. "Boss, they've got Johnson's place surrounded, Caldwell, and at least 15 men." "Johnson," Xavier repeated, confused. Charles Johnson owned the small ranch adjacent to Blackwood's property. "What do they want with him?" "It's not him they want," Tom panted. "Caldwell's telling everyone Johnson's harboring a fugitive. A bank robber named Cole Blackwood." Xavier felt the blood drain from his face. Beside him, Miguel cursed softly in Spanish. "They're saying you're him, boss," Tom continued, oblivious to the effect of his words. "Saying you're not Xavier Blackwood at all, but some outlaw with a price on his head. Johnson's just in the way." The moment Xavier had feared since settling in Montana had finally arrived. His past had caught up with him, threatening not just his freedom, but the lives of everyone around him. "What else?" he managed to ask. "Caldwell's got a U.S. Marshal with him," Tom added. "They're demanding Johnson turn you over, or they'll burn him out." A U.S. Marshal changed everything. This was no longer just Stillwater's vendetta over Sophia, but official justice seeking Cole Blackwood. "How long before they come here?" Xavier asked, mind racing through options that grew more limited by the second. "They were setting up when I left," Tom replied. "Could be hours, could be now." Xavier turned to Miguel, whose grave expression confirmed they were thinking the same thing. There was no running now, no hiding. The only path forward was through. "Get everyone ready," Xavier ordered. "Women and children in the storm cellar. Every man who can hold a rifle on the perimeter." "And you, Jefe?" Miguel asked quietly. Before Xavier could answer, the front door opened and Sophia stepped out. Her face was pale but composed, her eyes fixed on Xavier with an intensity that stopped him cold. "Cole Blackwood," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The outlaw who rode with Jesse Mayfield. The man who was with him when he died." The blood froze in Xavier's veins. "How did you—" "Harris," she replied. "He recognized you from wanted posters. Said you were the one who shot Jesse during the bank robbery." The accusation hung in the air between them, damning and irreversible. The secret Xavier had kept since the day he found Sophia on the road was finally exposed not by his confession, but by the cruel hand of fate. "Sophia," he began, but she cut him off with a raised hand. "All this time," she said, her voice shaking with emotion, "all these weeks, you knew who I was, who Jesse was to me, and you said nothing." Xavier had faced down Confederate cavalry charges and armed posses without flinching, but the betrayal in Sophia's eyes nearly brought him to his knees. "I didn't kill Jesse," he said hoarsely. "That much is true. He was shot by a posse member during our escape. I found him dying in a ravine." "And you left him there," she accused. "No," Xavier shook his head vehemently. "I stayed with him, held him while he died." The memory surfaced vivid and painful. "His last words were about you. He made me promise to find you, to protect you. He called you his sister, whether from delirium or deliberate deception, I don't know." Sophia's hand moved to the wedding band she wore around her neck, fingers clutching it like a talisman. Why should I believe anything you say now? Everything has been a lie. Not everything, Xavier insisted, taking a step toward her. Not the ranch, not my offer of marriage, not my promise to protect you and your child. Your promise, she echoed bitterly. The promise of a man who doesn't exist. Before Xavier could respond, Miguel called out urgently, "Riders coming! At least 20 from the East Road." Time had run out. Whatever reconciliation Xavier might have hoped for would have to wait. Caldwell and his men were coming, and with them the full weight of Xavier's past crimes. "We'll finish this later," he told Sophia, his voice hardening with resolve. "Right now, I need you inside, away from windows." For a moment, he thought she would refuse out of spite. Then her hand moved protectively to her abdomen, and she nodded curtly. "This isn't over between us." "No," Xavier agreed grimly. "It's just beginning." As Sophia disappeared into the house, Xavier turned to face the approaching dust cloud, the weight of his Colt revolver heavy against his hip. Cole Blackwood had spent years running from his past. Today, Xavier Blackwood would stand and fight for his future, even if that future no longer included the woman he had come to love. The riders approached in a tight formation, dust billowing behind them like storm clouds. Xavier counted at least 20 men, most armed with rifles, with Sheriff Caldwell and a stern-faced stranger, presumably the U.S. Marshal, leading the column. "Miguel," Xavier called, never taking his eyes off the approaching force. "Get everyone in position. No one fires unless I give the order." "And if they fire first?" Miguel asked grimly. "Then God help us all." Xavier strode to the center of the yard, positioning himself between the oncoming riders and the house where Sophia had retreated. Behind him, ranch hands took up defensive positions behind water troughs, wagon wheels, and the corners of buildings. The odds were grim, 7 ranch hands and Miguel against 20 armed men, backed by the law. The column halted about 50 yards from the house, spreading out in a semicircle. Sheriff Caldwell urged his horse forward, the marshal beside him. "Xavier Blackwood." Caldwell called out, his voice carrying across the yard. "Or should I say Cole Deadeye Blackwood? You're surrounded. Send out the Mayfield woman and surrender yourself, and no one else needs to get hurt." Xavier stood his ground, keeping his hands visible but ready. "What's the charge, Sheriff?" "Bank robbery, murder, and evading justice," the marshal answered before Caldwell could speak. He was older than Xavier had expected, with iron-gray hair and the weathered face of a man who'd spent decades in the saddle. "6 counts of robbery across 3 territories, 3 men killed during the Silver Creek job." "I didn't kill anyone in Silver Creek," Xavier called back. "And the woman has committed no crime. She stays here." "She's a material witness," Caldwell snapped. "Married to Jesse Mayfield, your partner in crime." "Widowed," Xavier corrected, "and innocent of any wrongdoing." The marshal studied him for a long moment. "I'm Marshal James Harker. I've been tracking the Silver Creek gang for nearly a year. You're the last one, Blackwood. The others are either dead or in custody." A murmur went through the ranch hands at this confirmation of Xavier's true identity. He could feel their eyes on his back, questioning, perhaps judging. "I know what I've done," Xavier acknowledged, "and I'll answer for it. But this is a working ranch with innocent people. There's no need for a firefight." "Agree to our terms, then," Caldwell demanded. "The woman comes with us, and you surrender your weapons." "And then what?" Xavier challenged. "A fair trial or an accident on the way back to Silver Creek. I know who you work for, Caldwell." The sheriff's face darkened with anger. "You're in no position to negotiate outlaw." Maybe not, Xavier conceded. But if bullets start flying, I guarantee you'll be the first to fall. The threat hung in the air, and several of Caldwell's deputies shifted uneasily in their saddles. They might have badges, but they weren't lawmen, just hired guns who knew Xavier's reputation with a pistol. Marshal Harker raised a hand, signaling for calm. I have no quarrel with your people, Blackwood, only with you. If you come peacefully, I give you my word you'll reach Silver Creek alive to stand trial. And what about Stillwater's interest in Miss Mayfield? Xavier pressed. Will your word protect her too? Harker frowned, glancing at Caldwell. What's this about Stillwater? Before Caldwell could formulate a response, the front door of the ranch house opened. Sophia stepped onto the porch, her back straight, chin lifted defiantly, despite the fear Xavier could read in her eyes. I'll speak for myself, she declared, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. I am Sophia Mayfield, widow of Jesse Mayfield. I knew nothing of my husband's criminal activities while he was alive, nor have I participated in any crimes since his death. Xavier tensed as all eyes shifted to Sophia. Get back inside, he urged in a low voice, but she ignored him, descending the porch steps to stand beside him. Mrs. Mayfield, Marshal Harker addressed her directly. I have no warrant for your arrest, but Sheriff Caldwell insists you're needed for questioning. Questioning about what? She challenged. My husband has been dead for months. I've been living quietly first with my brother-in-law Josiah, then here after Mr. Blackwood prevented Josiah from selling me to Vernon Stillwater. The marshal's brow furrowed. Selling you for $50, Sophia confirmed. To work in Stillwater's saloon. When I refused, my brother-in-law beat me and tried to deliver me by force. Mr. Blackwood intervened. Murmurs rose among the riders, and Xavier noticed several of the deputies exchanging uncomfortable glances. Even hardened men of the frontier had their limits, and forced servitude of white women crossed a line most weren't willing to tolerate. Marshal Harker turned to Caldwell. You failed to mention this part, Sheriff. Caldwell shifted in his saddle. The woman's lying, trying to protect her husband's partner. I have witnesses, Sophia countered. Including Harris, one of your own deputies, who is inside this house right now, with injuries sustained when he tried to warn us of your plan to burn this ranch to the ground. The marshal's face darkened. Is this true, Caldwell? She's twisting things, Caldwell blustered. Stillwater has a legitimate grievance. Blackwood stole what was rightfully purchased. A human being cannot be rightfully purchased in these United States. Xavier cut in his voice hard. Not since Appomattox. A tense silence fell over the yard. Xavier could see the calculation in Marshal Harker's eyes, weighing the conflicting stories, assessing the volatile situation before him. Finally, the older man made a decision. Sheriff, pull your men back. I want to speak with Blackwood and Mrs. Mayfield alone. Now wait just a minute, Caldwell protested. I have jurisdiction here, and I have federal authority, Harker interrupted coldly. Pull back, or I'll have you arrested for obstruction. For a moment, Xavier thought Caldwell might defy the order. Then, with a muttered curse, the sheriff signaled his men to retreat to the edge of the property. Marshal Harker dismounted and approached Xavier and Sophia, stopping a cautious distance away. I've been tracking the Silver Creek gang since they first hit the bank in Helena last year, he said without preamble. 5 robberies, 3 deaths. You were identified at 4 of those robberies, Blackwood. I was there, Xavier admitted, but I never fired on anyone who wasn't shooting at me first. The law doesn't make that distinction for bank robbers, Harker pointed out. I know, Xavier acknowledged, and I'm not asking for clemency, but these people, he gestured to the ranch around them, they're innocent. Whatever happens to me, I'm asking you to ensure they're not harmed. The marshal studied him thoughtfully. You've built something here, something legitimate. Trying to, Xavier agreed. Too late, perhaps, but trying all the same. Harker turned his attention to Sophia. And you, Mrs. Mayfield, you claim no knowledge of your husband's activities. I suspected, she admitted, but I didn't know for certain until after his death. I've been trying to rebuild my life since then. She's carrying a child, Xavier added quietly. Jesse's child. Understanding dawned in the marshal's weathered face. Complicates matters. There's more, Xavier continued, making a decision. In the house in my desk, there's a Bible that belonged to Jesse. In it, you'll find a list of names men who worked with Stillwater on various schemes, including the territorial judge who's been dismissing cases against him. It's why Stillwater wants Sophia silenced. She might have found it. Harker's eyebrows rose. You're offering evidence against Stillwater. In exchange for guaranteeing Sophia's safety, yes, Xavier confirmed. And allowing her to keep this ranch after I'm gone. She and her child will need a home. Xavier, no, Sophia protested, but he silenced her with a look. It's over, Sophia. It was always going to end this way. Marshal Harker considered the proposition. If this evidence is as valuable as you suggest, I might be able to arrange something. But you're still looking at a long sentence, Blackwood, maybe even hanging, depending on the judge. I understand, Xavier said grimly. Before Harker could respond, a shout came from the direction of the retreating deputies. Xavier turned to see one of Caldwell's men pointing urgently toward the eastern ridge. Following his gesture, Xavier spotted riders, at least a dozen, approaching rapidly from the direction of Silver Creek. Stillwater, Xavier muttered. He got impatient. Marshal Harker cursed under his breath. Caldwell was supposed to secure you legally. Looks like Stillwater's decided to take matters into his own hands. The new arrivals thundered toward the ranch, rifles raised. At their head rode a heavy-set man with a florid face that Xavier recognized from wanted posters as Vernon Stillwater himself. Without warning, one of the riders fired a shot into the air. "Take cover!" Xavier shouted, pushing Sophia toward the porch. Marshal Harker drew his pistol, positioning himself beside Xavier. "This changes things," the marshal growled. Stillwater's overplayed his hand. The ranch hands who had maintained their positions during the parley now raised their rifles in readiness. Miguel moved to Xavier's side, a Winchester repeater in his hands. "Orders, Jefe. Protect the house at all costs," Xavier replied. "No one gets to Sophia." Stillwater's men spread out, forming a line across the eastern approach to the ranch. Sheriff Caldwell rode to meet Stillwater, gesticulating angrily. "Seems there's a disagreement among our visitors," Marshal Harker observed dryly. "Caldwell wanted to keep up appearances," Xavier surmised. "Stillwater doesn't care anymore." Their assessment was confirmed moments later when Stillwater's booming voice carried across the yard. "Blackwood, send out the Mayfield woman now, or we burn this place to the ground." Marshal Harker stepped forward, badge held high. "This is U.S. Marshal James Harker. You are interfering with a federal arrest. Stand down immediately." Stillwater's response was a contemptuous laugh. "This isn't about your badge, Marshal. This is about what's mine." He pointed a meaty finger at the house. "That woman has something that belongs to me, and I want it back." "The Bible," Sophia whispered to Xavier. "Jesse must have taken it from Stillwater's safe during the robbery." Xavier nodded grimly. "Evidence of his corruption. Worth more than gold out here." Stillwater's patience was clearly exhausted. With a gesture to his men, he barked an order that sent two riders circling toward the barn torches now visible in their hands. "They're going to fire the outbuildings," Miguel warned. Xavier made his decision in an instant. Miguel, take 5 men and stop those riders. Marshal, if you're truly interested in justice now, would be the time to demonstrate it. To his credit, Harker didn't hesitate. Caldwell, he shouted. As a federal officer, I'm ordering you to arrest Vernon Stillwater for attempted arson and obstruction of justice. The sheriff's face contorted with indecision, caught between his corrupt alliance and the unmistakable authority in the marshal's voice. Before he could respond, Stillwater made the decision for him, drawing a pistol and firing directly at Harker. The marshal ducked the bullet, whizzing over his head. In the next instant, chaos erupted. Gunfire exploded from both sides, men diving for cover, horses rearing in panic. Xavier pushed Sophia down behind a water trough, shielding her with his body as bullets splintered wood around them. "Get to the house!" he shouted above the din. "The cellar! Go!" For once she didn't argue, scrambling toward the porch in a crouch. Xavier provided covering fire, his Colt barking in his hand with deadly accuracy. 2 of Stillwater's men fell from their saddles before the others realized the danger of remaining mounted. Across the yard, Miguel and the ranch hands had engaged the torch-bearing riders, preventing them from reaching the barn. Marshal Harker had taken cover behind a wagon, exchanging fire with Stillwater's men while shouting orders to the deputies who seemed increasingly uncertain of their allegiances. Sheriff Caldwell, caught in the open when the shooting started, took a bullet in the shoulder and fell from his horse, crawling desperately toward the dubious shelter of a horse trough. Xavier's focus narrowed to the essential task: keep Stillwater's men away from the house. He methodically picked his targets, the years of outlaw gunfighting returning with fluid precision. Each shot found its mark, not always killing, but ensuring the target was out of the fight. A bullet grazed his arm, tearing through his shirt sleeve and leaving a burning furrow across his bicep. Another ricocheted off the water pump beside him, sending metal fragments stinging against his cheek. Xavier barely registered the pain, his concentration absolute. From the corner of his eye, he saw Stillwater directing 3 of his men toward the side of the house. Understanding their intent immediately, Xavier broke from cover, racing to intercept them. He caught the first man at the corner of the building, the butt of his revolver connecting solidly with the man's temple, dropping him unconscious. The second attacker turned, leveling a shotgun at Xavier's chest. Before he could fire, a rifle cracked from the house window above, and the man staggered backward, clutching his shoulder. Xavier looked up in surprise to see Mrs. Cooper at the window, a grim expression on her face, as she worked the lever on Miguel's spare Winchester. "The back door," she called down to him. "They're trying the back." Xavier sprinted around the house, arriving at the kitchen entrance just as the third man was attempting to force it open. The outlaw turned, pistol rising, but Xavier was faster. His Colt roared once, and the man crumpled against the door. Inside, Xavier found Sophia and Harris barricaded in the kitchen, the wounded deputy holding a shotgun despite his injuries. "They're pulling back," Harris reported, peering through a window. "Marshall's got them pinned down." Xavier checked his ammunition. 2 bullets left. He reloaded quickly from the cartridges in his belt, wincing as the movement pulled at his injured arm. "You're hit," Sophia said, reaching for him. "It's nothing," he dismissed. "Stay here. I need to help Miguel." Her hand caught his sleeve. "Why are you still fighting for me, after what I said?" Xavier met her eyes, finding fear there, but also something else, regret perhaps, or understanding. "Because I made a promise," he said simply, "to Jesse and to you." Before she could respond, a tremendous crash shook the house as something heavy struck the front wall. Running to the parlor window, Xavier saw that Stillwater had changed tactics. Several of his men had unhitched a wagon and were using it as a battering ram against the front of the house. "They're desperate," Xavier muttered. Stillwater knows if he doesn't get that Bible, he's finished. The ramming continued, each impact making the timbers of the house groan in protest. Xavier knew the structure wouldn't withstand many more such assaults. "Where is the Bible?" he asked Sophia, who had followed him into the parlor. "In your desk drawer, where you keep it." Xavier nodded. "Get it. We may need to use it as leverage." As Sophia hurried to retrieve the evidence, Xavier formulated a plan. The direct confrontation was creating too many casualties on both sides. If he could get to Stillwater himself, perhaps he could end this without further bloodshed. Sophia returned with the Bible, its leather cover stained dark with what Xavier knew was Jesse's blood. "Here," she said, pressing it into his hands. Xavier opened it to the back pages where Jesse had meticulously recorded names, dates, and transactions, a detailed accounting of Stillwater's corruption that implicated half the officials in the county. "This is what he's willing to kill for," Xavier said grimly, showing Sophia the damning evidence. A particularly violent crash rocked the house, followed by the sound of splintering wood. They were breaking through. "Xavier!" Miguel's voice called urgently from outside. "They've breached the north wall." Decision made, Xavier tucked the Bible inside his shirt. "I'm going out there. When I give the signal, I want you to run for the cellar. Harris will cover you." "What are you going to do?" Sophia demanded, fear evident in her voice. "End this," Xavier replied. "One way or another." Before she could protest further, he moved to the kitchen where Harris still maintained his vigil at the window. "Keep her safe," Xavier instructed, "no matter what happens to me." And the wounded deputy nodded solemnly. "You have my word." Xavier took a deep breath, checked his weapons one last time, and stepped out the back door. Circling the house, he kept to the shadows, making his way toward the front, where the main battle continued. The wagon had succeeded in creating a jagged hole in the front wall, but rifle fire from the upper windows, Mrs. Cooper, again bless her, had prevented Stillwater's men from exploiting the breach. Marshal Harker had organized a defensive line using the ranch's wagons and water troughs, pinning down several of Stillwater's men. Others had fallen back to regroup near the barn, where Stillwater himself stood bellowing orders and curses in equal measure. Spotted Miguel crouched behind an overturned wagon, bleeding from a wound to his leg, but still had firing steadily. Their eyes met, and Xavier signaled his intent with a quick hand gesture. Miguel's eyes widened in understanding, then narrowed with determination. He nodded once, then laid down a barrage of covering fire that forced Stillwater's men to duck for cover. Using the distraction, Xavier darted from shadow to shadow, making his way around the perimeter of the firefight until he was positioned behind the barn, where Stillwater and his remaining lieutenants had gathered. "Running out of ammunition," one man was saying as Xavier crept closer. "Maybe we should pull back, try again after dark." "No!" Stillwater snarled. "I want that Bible without it. We're all looking at prison when the territorial governor gets involved." "But Caldwell's down, half our men are hit, and there's a damn U.S. Marshal out there." Another protested. "The Marshal dies like anyone else," Stillwater growled. "And once he's gone, we finish this. Burn the house, kill Blackwood, and find the woman. She knows where it is." Xavier had heard enough. He stepped around the corner of the barn, both revolvers leveled at Stillwater's broad back. "Looking for this?" he asked, using one gun to tap the Bible tucked in his shirt. The men whirled hands, moving toward weapons, but froze at the sight of Xavier's aimed revolvers. "Blackwood!" Stillwater spat, his florid face darkening further with rage. "Tell your men to throw down their weapons," Xavier ordered. "It's over, Stillwater." The saloon owner laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You think I'm afraid of you? One man against my crew. One man who never misses, Xavier reminded him. They don't call me Deadeye for nothing. You'll be dead before your gun clears leather. Uncertainty flickered across Stillwater's face, but he masked it quickly with bravado. My men will cut you down. Maybe, Xavier acknowledged, but you won't be alive to see it. He took a deliberate step forward. Your choice. Surrender now and face trial or die here, knowing that Bible is still going to the marshal. Stillwater's eyes darted between Xavier's implacable expression and the deadly steadiness of his aimed revolvers. Something in the outlaw-turned-rancher's demeanor must have convinced him of the sincerity of the threat. Stand down, he ordered his men reluctantly. For now. Guns on the ground, Xavier instructed. Slowly. One by one, Stillwater's lieutenants placed their weapons in the dirt. Stillwater himself was last, his hand hovering near his holster, as if still considering a final desperate play. Don't, Xavier warned, his voice deadly quiet. You're not fast enough. With a curse, Stillwater drew his pistol not to aim, but to drop it ostentatiously at his feet. Satisfied. Kick them away, Xavier ordered. As the men complied, Xavier raised his voice. Marshal Harker, I have Stillwater. Tell your men to hold their fire. A moment of tense silence followed, then Harker's voice rang out. Cease fire, cease fire. Gradually the gunshots tapered off, replaced by an eerie quiet broken only by the moans of the wounded and the creak of the damaged house settling. Now what? Stillwater sneered. You going to execute us all? Add more murder charges to your list. Now, Xavier said evenly, we walk out there together, and you order your remaining men to surrender. Or I put a bullet in you and take my chances with them. Your choice. Stillwater glared at him with naked hatred, but self-preservation won out. Fine, but this isn't over, Blackwood. Not by a long shot. For today it is, Xavier replied. Move. With his guns trained on Stillwater and his lieutenants, Xavier marched them out into the open yard, where Marshal Harker and the remaining deputies quickly took them into custody. Across the battlefield, Stillwater's surviving men, seeing their leader captured, began to throw down their weapons. Miguel limped over his leg, crudely bandaged. Jefe, you crazy son of a... He broke off, grinning, despite his pain. It worked. Xavier allowed himself a small smile. This time... He handed the Bible to Marshal Harker. As promised, everything you need to clean up Silver Creek is in there. Harker leafed through the pages, his expression growing grimmer with each revelation. This is... extensive. Half the county government is implicated. Jesse was thorough, Xavier acknowledged. It's why Stillwater wanted Sophia so badly. He thought she might have found it after Jesse's death. And our arrangement, Xavier pressed. Sophia keeps the ranch. The marshal hesitated, clearly torn between duty and the pragmatic reality before him. The evidence is valuable, he finally conceded. And you did just help bring down one of the most corrupt operations in the territory. He sighed heavily. I'll need to consult with the federal judge, but I believe an accommodation can be reached. Relief washed through Xavier, though he kept his expression neutral. Thank you, Marshal. Don't thank me yet, Harker cautioned. You're still under arrest, Blackwood. Bank robbery and the deaths during those robberies, those charges stand. I understand, Xavier said quietly. As the remaining deputies began rounding up prisoners and tending to the wounded, Xavier turned toward the house. Sophia stood on the damaged porch, her face pale but composed, as she surveyed the aftermath of the battle. Their eyes met across the yard, and in that moment, something passed between them, an acknowledgment, perhaps, of the truth they both now faced. Xavier Blackwood, the man she had agreed to marry, was a fiction. Cole Blackwood, the outlaw who had ridden with her husband, was now in custody and bound for trial. Whatever future they might have imagined together lay in ruins like the bullet-riddled walls of the ranch house behind her. Yet as Marshall Harker approached with manacles ready, Xavier found himself strangely at peace. He had finally stopped running, faced his past, and in doing so had secured a future for Sophia and her unborn child. It wasn't the redemption he had sought, but perhaps it was the only kind available to a man like him. "I need to speak with her," he told Harker, "before you take me." The marshal studied him for a moment, then nodded. 5 minutes, no more." Xavier crossed the yard slowly, conscious of every step bringing him closer to a goodbye he had never prepared for. When he reached the porch, Sophia remained still, her eyes never leaving his face. "You're leaving," she said, a statement rather than a question. "I have to answer for what I've done," he replied. "But you'll keep the ranch. Marshal Harker has agreed to arrange it in exchange for the evidence against Stillwater." Sophia's hands twisted in her skirt. "For how long your sentence will likely be lengthy," he acknowledged. "Perhaps permanent." The unspoken reality hung between them. Bank robbery with fatalities often carried a hanging sentence, even if the accused hadn't fired the fatal shots. "You knew this would happen," she said softly. "From the moment you brought me here. You knew eventually they'd find you." Xavier nodded. "I hoped I'd have more time. Time to build something lasting, something that would endure after I was gone." His gaze dropped to her abdomen where Jesse's child grew. "I think I succeeded in a way." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. "Why did you lie about Jesse? About knowing him?" "At first to protect myself," Xavier admitted. "Then to protect you from a painful truth. I was a coward, and I'm sorry for that." "And your proposal, was that a lie too?" "No," he said firmly. "That was the most honest thing I've done in years." She studied his face, searching for deception, and finding none. "I don't know who you are anymore, Xavier or Cole. I'm not sure I ever knew either of them." "I'm both," he replied simply. "The worst of Cole and the best of Xavier. A man trying to outrun his sins and failing, but perhaps finding something worth fighting for along the way." Marshal Harker approached his expression, apologetic but firm. "Time's up, Blackwood." Xavier nodded in acknowledgement, then turned back to Sophia. "Miguel will help you rebuild. The ranch hands, too. They're good men." "And you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He managed a sad smile. "I'll be the story you tell your child someday. The outlaw who tried to make amends." Marshal Harker cleared his throat. "We need to move out before dark." Xavier held Sophia's gaze for one last moment, memorizing every detail of her face. "Goodbye, Sophia Mayfield." As he turned to go, her hand caught his sleeve. "Wait." He paused, heart hammering in his chest. "The child," she said softly. "If it's a boy, would you mind if I named him Cole, not for the outlaw, but for the man who saved us both?" Something broke open inside Xavier's chest, a dam holding back emotions he'd refused to acknowledge. "I would be honored." He managed his voice rough with feeling. Then Harker's hand was on his shoulder, guiding him away. Xavier allowed himself to be led, his wrists secured with manacles that felt strangely right after so many years of undeserved freedom. As they mounted up to leave, he took one final look at the ranch, his ranch with its damaged buildings and blood-soaked earth. Sophia still stood on the porch, her figure growing smaller as they rode away. She didn't wave, and neither did he. Some partings were beyond such simple gestures. But as the ranch disappeared behind a bend in the road, Xavier carried with him the image of her standing straight and proud, one hand resting protectively over her unborn child, the future he had sacrificed everything to secure. The Silver Creek courthouse stood like a sentinel of order in a town that had known precious little of it. 6 months had passed since the shootout at Blackwood Ranch, and today Cole Blackwood would face the judgment that had been deferred through a winter of testimony and legal maneuvering. The courtroom was packed to capacity. Citizens of Silver Creek pressed shoulder to shoulder with ranchers from outlying homesteads, all eager to witness the conclusion of a trial that had exposed corruption at every level of the county government. In the wake of Vernon Stillwater's arrest and the revelations from Jesse Mayfield's Bible, a wave of reform had swept through the territory, bringing down corrupt officials and ushering in new leadership. Cole sat at the defendant's table back straight, despite the shackles on his wrists and ankles. The months in custody had stripped away the softness of ranch life, leaving his face leaner, his beard trimmed short by prison regulations. Yet there was a calmness about him that hadn't been there before, the serenity of a man who had stopped running from himself. Behind him, the gallery rustled with whispers as Judge Howard Franklin entered the courtroom. Appointed by the territorial governor specifically to handle the high-profile case, Franklin was known for his fairness and imperviousness to bribery qualities that had been in short supply under Stillwater's influence. "All rise," called the bailiff, and the assembly stood as one. Judge Franklin settled into his seat, adjusting his spectacles as he reviewed the papers before him. "Be seated," he commanded, and the room complied with a collective rustle of clothing and creaking of benches. "Cole Blackwood," the judge addressed him directly, "this court has heard extensive testimony regarding your involvement in the Silver Creek bank robbery and subsequent crimes. The jury has reached its verdict on all counts." Cole nodded, his expression unchanging. He had pled guilty to bank robbery, but maintained his innocence on the murder charges, and the trial had focused largely on establishing the degree of his culpability for the deaths that occurred during the robberies. "Before we proceed," Judge Franklin continued, "I understand there is a motion from the prosecution." Marshal Harker rose from his seat at the prosecution table. "Yes, Your Honor. In light of the defendant's cooperation in the Stillwater investigation, which has led to the conviction of 14 officials on corruption charges, the federal government moves to amend the charges against Cole Blackwood." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Cole himself looked up in surprise. This was unexpected. "Specifically," Harker continued, "we move to drop the murder charges in exchange for guilty pleas on all robbery counts, with a recommendation for 15 years imprisonment rather than capital punishment." The whispers in this gallery grew louder, forcing the judge to bang his gavel for silence. "Your reasoning, Marshal?" Franklin inquired, peering over his spectacles. "The evidence provided by Mr. Blackwood has proven invaluable in cleaning up corruption throughout the territory. Furthermore, testimony from multiple witnesses has confirmed that while present during the shootings, Blackwood did not fire the fatal shots. While this does not absolve him of legal responsibility as an accomplice, it does merit consideration in sentencing." Judge Franklin nodded thoughtfully. "Mr. Blackwood, do you accept the prosecution's offer?" Cole rose to his feet. "I do, Your Honor." "Very well." The judge adjusted his papers. "In that case, this court sentences you, Cole Blackwood, to 15 years in the territorial prison for multiple counts of bank robbery and associated crimes. With time served and good behavior, you may be eligible for parole after 10 years. He paused, studying Cole over his spectacles. "Given the unusual circumstances and your cooperation, I am also granting the defense motion regarding the disposition of your property. Blackwood Ranch will be held in trust for your designated heir, with management rights granted to Sophia Mayfield until such time as you are released or the heir reaches majority. Relief washed through Cole. The ranch would be safe. Sophia and her child would have a home regardless of what happened to him. This court is adjourned. The judge's gavel fell with finality, and the room erupted into conversation. As guards prepared to escort him back to his cell, Cole felt a presence behind him. Turning, he found Marshal Harker standing there, hat in hand. 15 years is a long time, Blackwood, the marshal said quietly, but it's better than the alternative. Yes, Cole agreed. Thank you for honoring our arrangement. A deal's a deal, Harker replied simply. Then, lowering his voice further, there's someone here to see you. I've arranged for you to have a few minutes in the anteroom before transport. Cole's heart lurched. Sophia. The marshal nodded. She's been waiting all day. Seemed important to her to be here despite her condition. Before Cole could respond, the guards took his arms, leading him not toward the cells, but to a small room off the main courtroom. They positioned themselves outside the door, allowing a measure of privacy that was as unexpected as it was welcome. When the door opened again, Sophia entered. Cole's breath caught in his throat. She was radiant in her pregnancy, her belly now prominently rounded beneath a simple blue dress. Her honey-brown hair was pinned up neatly, and though her face showed signs of strain, there was a quiet determination in her eyes that hadn't been there when they first met. Xavier, she said, then caught herself. Cole, I'm still not used to that. Either name will do, he replied softly. It's good to see you, Sophia. She moved closer, studying his face. You look thin. A small smile touched his lips. Prison fare isn't up to Mrs. Cooper's standards. No, I don't imagine it is. She hesitated, then asked, Did you know about the deal? The reduced sentence? Cole shook his head. Harker kept that close. I was prepared for the worst. As was I. Her hand moved to her abdomen, a protective gesture that had become familiar. The baby is due in 2 weeks. Dr. Williams says everything looks healthy. I'm glad, Cole said, simply, fighting the urge to reach for her to feel the life growing within her. The shackles around his wrists served as a stark reminder of the barriers between them. Sophia seemed to read his thoughts. Without asking permission, she took his bound hands and placed them gently against her belly. Beneath his palms, Cole felt a strong kick, and something inside him cracked open. He's active, Sophia smiled, especially at night. Mrs. Cooper says that's a sign of a strong will. Cole whispered it. Yes, a boy. Her eyes, met his. Cole Robert Mayfield, if you still approve of the name. Cole swallowed hard against the sudden tightness in his throat. It's a fine name, he managed. They stood in silence for a moment, his hands still resting on her belly, feeling the occasional movements of the child within. There was an intimacy to it that transcended their complicated history, a connection to a future that would continue without him. The ranch is doing well, Sophia said, finally breaking the silence. Miguel has been invaluable. The herd increased by 30 head this spring, and we've repaired most of the damage from that day. And you, Cole asked quietly, how are you faring? A shadow crossed her face. Some days are harder than others. The nightmares come less frequently now. She paused. I still have questions about Jesse, about you, things I may never fully understand. Ask me anything, Cole offered. I have nothing left to hide. Sophia considered this, then shook her head. Not today. There will be time for that on future visits. If you want me to visit, that is. I'd like that, he said, perhaps too quickly. Very much. She smiled a genuine warmth that reached her eyes. Then I shall. And when the baby comes, I'll bring him too. He should know the man who saved his life, even if the circumstances are unusual. The door opened, and a guard appeared. Time's up, Blackwood. Cole reluctantly lowered his hands from Sophia's belly, already missing the connection. Take care of yourself, Sophia, and the boy. I will. She reached up, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead, with a tenderness that caught him off guard. 15 years is not forever, Xavier. Remember that. As the guards led him away, Cole carried the memory of her touch like a talisman against the dark years ahead. 15 years was indeed not forever, though it might feel that way in the confines of a prison cell. But for the first time in his life, Cole Blackwood had something beyond survival to look forward to, a future that, while deferred, held the promise of redemption. Spring had given way to summer by the time Cole arrived at the territorial prison in Deer Lodge. The facility was as grim as its reputation, a stark compound of stone and iron, set against the backdrop of the Montana mountains, designed to house the worst offenders the territory produced. As a high-profile prisoner, Cole was assigned to a solitary cell for the initial months of his incarceration. The isolation was both blessing and curse protection from inmates who might target a former outlaw, but a punishment in the endless hours of confinement with only his thoughts for company. He adapted to prison life with the same quiet resilience that had served him throughout his turbulent existence. He followed rules, avoided conflicts, and gradually earned small privileges through his exemplary behavior. By autumn, he had been permitted to join the general population and assigned to the prison workshop, where his skill with leather and wood made him a valuable craftsman. Letters from Blackwood Ranch arrived regularly, carefully written accounts of ranch life penned in Sophia's elegant hand. She wrote of mundane matters, calving season, a new well dug near the eastern pasture, Mrs. Cooper's ongoing battle with gophers in the garden. Between the lines, Cole read the greater story of a woman building a life from the fragments she'd been given, of a community healing from wounds, both physical and spiritual. The first photograph arrived 3 months into his sentence, a studio portrait of Sophia holding a swaddled infant with a shock of dark hair. The baby's eyes were open, staring into the camera, with an intensity that reminded Cole painfully of Jesse. On the back, Sophia had written simply, Cole Robert Mayfield, born June 12, 1877, healthy and strong-willed. Cole kept the photograph in his Bible, not Jesse's evidence-laden one, which had been retained by the court, but a new one, provided by the prison chaplain. Each night, he studied the image before sleep, claimed him, committing to memory every detail of the child he would not see grow up. Visitors were rare in Deer Lodge, the prison being remote even by Montana standards. So when, in the dead of winter, a guard announced Cole had a visitor, he was taken by surprise. Blackwood, the guard called, rapping his baton against the cell bars. Visitor in the hall. Make yourself presentable. Cole straightened his prison uniform as best he could and followed the guard down the long corridor to the visiting area, a cheerless room divided by a mesh screen with guards posted at either end. Miguel Ortiz waited on the other side, his weathered face creased with what might have been a smile beneath his impressive mustache. Despite the freezing temperatures outside, he wore only a light jacket, seemingly impervious to the cold that had other visitors huddled and shivering. Jefe, Miguel greeted him as Cole took his seat. You look institutionalized. Despite everything, Cole laughed, a rusty sound from disuse. You look the same as ever, old friend. The cold still doesn't touch you. Miguel shrugged. When you grow up in the mountains of Mexico, Montana, winters are merely inconvenient. For several minutes they exchanged pleasantries, careful to avoid topics the guards might find interesting. Then, when the guards seemed suitably bored with their conversation, Miguel leaned closer to the screen. "She didn't send me," he said quietly. "Doesn't know I'm here. But I thought you should know the boy is thriving. Strong lungs, that one. Keeps the whole house awake some nights." A lump formed in Cole's throat. "And Sophia. She manages. The ranch, too. We had a good year cattle prices held, and the new bull you bought before everything, has improved the calves considerably." "Good," Cole nodded. "That's good." Miguel studied him through the mesh. "There are other things you should know, Jefe. Things I cannot write in letters." Cole tensed. Stillwater. Still in prison awaiting federal trial, but he has friends even now. There have been incidents. "What kind of incidents?" Cole demanded, keeping his voice low but intense. "A fire in the north pasture. A fence cut during a storm that scattered half the herd. Nothing we couldn't handle." Miguel hastened to add, seeing the alarm in Cole's face. "But deliberate. Messages." Cold fury washed through Cole. Even imprisoned Stillwater remained a threat to those Cole had sought to protect. "Has Marshal Harker been informed?" "See, he sent a deputy to investigate, but without proof." Miguel spread his hands in a helpless gesture. "We have increased security. I sleep in the barn now with a rifle. The hands take turns watching at night." Cole's fists clenched with frustration. He should be there defending his home, his family. Instead, he was locked away, powerless to help. "There's more," Miguel continued, his voice dropping further. "Josiah Mayfield has returned to Silver Creek." This was unexpected news. "Josiah, what does he want?" "He claims to have reformed, says he wants to make amends with his sister-in-law and meet his nephew." Miguel's expression made clear his skepticism. "Sophia has refused to see him." "Good," Cole muttered. "He can't be trusted." Miguel nodded. "My thoughts exactly. But he persists, sends letters, gifts for the child. Some in town speak well of him, now says he's working honest jobs, attending church." "People change," Cole acknowledged, thinking of his own transformation from outlaw to rancher. "But Josiah sold his sister-in-law like property. That takes a particular kind of callousness." "Which is why I watch him," Miguel confirmed. "From a distance." The guard shifted, signaling that their time was growing short. Cole leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Tell Sophia to be careful. Trust her instincts about Josiah. And Miguel—" He hesitated, then continued, "Take care of them, please." "With my life, Jefe," Miguel promised solemnly. "Always." As Miguel rose to leave, he slipped something through a gap in the mesh screen, a small folded paper that Cole palmed reflexively, hiding it from the guard's view. "Until next time," Miguel said at normal volume, "stay strong, my friend." Only when Cole had been returned to his cell and the evening count completed did he dare unfold the contraband paper. It was a small pencil sketch, clearly drawn by an amateur, but with careful attention to detail. It showed the ranch house in summer, with Sophia sitting on the porch, the baby in her arms. Mrs. Cooper stood nearby, and Miguel's dog lay at Sophia's feet. Across the bottom, in Sophia's handwriting, "Your family awaits your return." Cole traced the lines with a calloused finger, memorizing every stroke, before carefully hiding the drawing in his Bible beside the photograph. For the first time since his sentencing, he allowed himself to imagine a future beyond prison walls, a future where Cole Blackwood might find a place in the life Xavier Blackwood had built. Years passed with the slow inevitability of changing seasons. Cole marked time by the milestones in Sophia's letters. Cole Roberts' first steps, first words, first ride on a pony, led by Miguel around the corral. The boy grew from infant to toddler to child, his development chronicled in occasional photographs and Sophia's detailed descriptions. The ranch prospered under her management. With Miguel's help and the loyalty of hands who had stayed through the worst of times, Blackwood Ranch expanded its herd and even purchased the adjacent property that Xavier had once dreamed of acquiring. Sophia wrote of learning the cattle business, of making decisions that kept the operation profitable through drought years and market fluctuations. She visited when she could, making the arduous journey to Deer Lodge perhaps twice a year. Each visit revealed subtle changes in her, a new confidence in her bearing, a deepening of character, etched in fine lines at the corners of her eyes. She never brought the boy, though Cole understood the reasoning. A prison was no place for a child, and the connection between Cole Robert and the imprisoned man was complex, to say the least. Josiah Mayfield remained a peripheral figure in Sophia's letters, mentioned only in passing. He had apparently established himself as a freight operator in Silver Creek, transporting goods between mining communities. According to Sophia, he occasionally inquired after her and the boy, but respected her wishes to maintain distance. Vernon Stillwater received a 20-year federal sentence for corruption, effectively removing him as a threat. The incidents at the ranch ceased after his transfer to a prison back east, though Cole never fully relaxed his vigilance. Men like Stillwater had long memories and longer reaches. Inside the prison walls, Cole built a life of disciplined routine. He rose before dawn, worked his shift in the wood shop, exercised in the yard when weather permitted, and read voraciously from the limited prison library. The chaplain noticed his quiet intelligence and enlisted him to teach other inmates to read, a task Cole approached with unexpected satisfaction. "You have a gift for teaching," the chaplain observed one evening, finding Cole helping a younger prisoner struggle through a simple text. "Have you considered what you'll do when your sentence is complete?" Cole looked up, startled by the question. For so long, release had seemed a distant abstraction rather than a concrete possibility. "I haven't thought that far ahead," he admitted. "Perhaps you should," the older man suggested gently. 10 years will pass whether you plan for them or not. Better to meet freedom prepared than unprepared." The advice lingered in Cole's mind, prompting him to request books on modern ranching techniques, animal husbandry, and business management from the Territorial Library. If, when he returned to Blackwood Ranch, he wanted to contribute rather than disrupt the successful operation Sophia had built. 7 years into his sentence, Cole received unexpected news. Marshal Harker visited the prison looking older and more careworn than Cole remembered, but still carrying himself with the same quiet authority. "Blackwood," he greeted Cole in the visitation room. "You're looking well. Prison agrees with me," Cole replied dryly. "What brings you to Deer Lodge, Marshal? Not a social call, I imagine." Harker smiled slightly. "Perceptive as ever. No, I'm here on official business, yours specifically." He produced a document from his coat. "The territorial governor is reviewing cases where substantial cooperation with authorities resulted in significant public benefit. Your testimony against Stillwater and his network qualifies." Cole studied the paper, a formal commutation inquiry. "What does this mean exactly?" "It means," Harker explained, "that your sentence could be reduced significantly. The governor is considering commuting your remaining time to probationary status, which would allow you to return to Blackwood Ranch under certain restrictions." The possibility of early release, of seeing the ranch, Sophia, the boy, hit Cole with physical force. He struggled to maintain his composure. What kind of restrictions? Standard conditions for a parolee, regular check-ins with the local sheriff, no leaving the territory without permission, no firearms. Harker paused. "And you'd need someone willing to take responsibility for you, a sponsor who would report any violations." "Sophia," Cole said immediately. Harker nodded. Mrs. Mayfield has already indicated her willingness to serve in that capacity. In fact, she was quite persuasive in her letters to the governor's office. A surge of gratitude washed through Cole, even after everything Sophia was still fighting for him. When, he asked, not daring to hope for a specific answer. The process takes time, Harker cautioned. Reviews, paperwork, hearings. Could be months, possibly a year. But, he added, seeing Cole's face fall slightly, I've expedited what I can. You've served 7 years of a 15-year sentence with exemplary behavior. The warden's recommendation is strong. Cole nodded, absorbing the information. After so long measuring time in small increments, days, weeks, months, the prospect of years suddenly vanishing from his sentence was almost disorienting. Thank you, Marshal, he said finally, for bringing this news yourself. Harker waved away the thanks. I owed you that much, at least. Your information didn't just bring down Stillwater, it exposed corruption throughout the territory. Changed things for the better. As the Marshal prepared to leave, Cole called after him. Marshal, would you tell Sophia? Tell her I'm ready. For whatever comes next. Harker studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I believe you are Blackwood. I believe you are. The parole hearing took place in Helena on a crisp autumn day, 9 months after Marshal Harker's visit. Cole stood before the territorial board in a borrowed suit that hung loose on his prison-thinned frame, his hair and beard neatly trimmed for the occasion. Sophia sat in the gallery behind him, a steady presence he could feel rather than see. She had visited the day before, bringing news of the ranch and of Cole Robert, now 8 years old, and fascinated by horses. She had not brought the boy a decision Cole understood and respected, though it pained him. If the hearing went poorly, better the child not witness his disappointment. The proceedings were largely formal, the decision apparently made before Cole entered the room. Governor Wilson read the commutation order himself, emphasizing the exceptional circumstances that justified early release. Based on your cooperation with federal authorities, your exemplary prison record, and the strong support of community members, including U.S. Marshal James Harker, this board grants your release on parole for the remainder of your 15-year sentence. The governor fixed Cole with a stern look over his spectacles. This is a conditional release, Mr. Blackwood. Any violation of the terms we've outlined will result in your immediate return to Deer Lodge to serve the remaining time. Is that clear? Yes, sir, Cole replied, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Perfectly clear. Very well. The governor signed the document with a flourish. You are released into the custody of Mrs. Sophia Mayfield, who has agreed to serve as your sponsor and report any infractions. Mrs. Mayfield, do you understand and accept this responsibility? Sophia rose from her seat, composed and dignified, in a simple blue traveling dress. I do, Governor Wilson. Mr. Blackwood will be residing at Blackwood Ranch under my supervision, where he will assist with ranch operations. The governor nodded, seemingly satisfied. Then this hearing is concluded. Mr. Blackwood, you are free to go subject to the restrictions outlined in your parole agreement. Free. The word echoed in Cole's mind as he was led to an anteroom where the final paperwork would be processed. Free after 7 years behind stone walls and iron bars. Free to return to the life he had started to build before everything had collapsed around him. Sophia was waiting when he emerged, his few personal possessions, Bible letters, photographs contained in a small cloth bag. For a moment, they simply stood looking at each other, the reality of the situation washing over them both. Ready to go home, she asked softly. Home. Another word that carried weight beyond its simple syllable. Yes, he replied, his voice rough with emotion, more than ready. The journey from Helena to Blackwood Ranch took 3 days by stagecoach and horseback. They traveled in relative silence the years of separation, creating a distance that neither seemed quite ready to bridge. Cole drank in the landscape hungrily, the open skies and rolling plains, a balm to senses deprived of nature's vastness for too long. As they crested the final rise that overlooked the ranch, Cole reined in his horse, overcome by the sight spread before him. The ranch had flourished in his absence, new outbuildings, expanded corrals, fields of hay, where once there had been only wild grass. The main house had been enlarged, a second story added with dormer windows that caught the late afternoon sun. "You've made it thrive," he said, a catch in his voice. Sophia guided her mare alongside his. "We had a good foundation to build on." They rode down to the ranch yard side by side. As they approached, figures emerged from the house and barn. Mrs. Cooper, now white-haired but still straight-backed and formidable. Miguel, his mustache gone completely gray. Several hands Cole recognized and some he didn't. And at the center of the gathering, standing slightly apart, a boy of 8, with dark hair and serious eyes that widened as the riders approached. Cole Robert Mayfield was tall for his age, with his mother's delicate features set in a face that nevertheless evoked memories of Jessie in its stubborn chin and high forehead. Cole dismounted slowly, suddenly uncertain. How did one greet a child who was, and wasn't, a boy, who had been told? What exactly? Sophia saved him from his indecision, dismounting gracefully and moving to place a hand on her son's shoulder. "Cole, this is Mr. Blackwood. He built this ranch before you were born, and now he's come home to help us run it." The boy studied Cole with an intensity that was disconcerting in one so young. "You're the man from the photographs," he said finally. "The one who saved my mother." Cole glanced at Sophia in surprise. She gave a small nod, confirming that she had shared at least part of their story with her son. "I did what anyone would have done," Cole replied, crouching to the boy's level. "Your mother is a remarkable woman." Cole Robert considered this, then extended his hand with solemn formality. "Thank you for coming back, Mr. Blackwood. The north fence needs fixing, and Miguel says you're the best with fence posts." A ripple of laughter went through the assembled ranch folk, breaking the tension of the moment. Cole solemnly shook the boy's hand, fighting back unexpected emotion. "I'll take a look at it first thing tomorrow," he promised. Mrs. Cooper stepped forward, enfolding Cole in a fierce embrace that belied her age. "About time you got back," she muttered against his shoulder. "Been keeping your room ready for years." One by one, the ranch hands welcomed him home. Tom, now a seasoned cowboy rather than the green youth Cole remembered. Johnson from the neighboring ranch. Even young hands who knew him only by reputation. Miguel was last greeting Cole with a firm handshake that turned into an embrace between brothers. "Welcome home, Jefe," the Mexican said simply. As the gathering dispersed, Sophia touched Cole's arm lightly. "You must be tired from the journey. Come, I'll show you to your room." She led him into the house, which had been transformed as thoroughly inside as out. New furniture, fresh paint expansions that had turned the modest cabin into a proper ranch house. Only the study remained largely as Cole remembered it, with his old desk still positioned by the window overlooking the yard. "I thought you might want this space to remain familiar," Sophia explained, seeing his surprise. "Though I've been using the desk for ranch accounts. We can arrange another if you prefer." "No," Cole said quickly. "I'm glad it's been useful. The whole ranch has. You've done more than I could have imagined, Sophia." She smiled, a hint of pride in her expression. "We've worked hard, all of us. Now, let me show you where you'll be staying." To his surprise, she led him not to his old bedroom, but to a newly built addition at the rear of the house, a comfortable suite with its own entrance from the garden. "I thought you might appreciate some privacy," she explained, "after so many years in close quarters." The thoughtfulness of the arrangement touched him deeply. "Thank you. It's perfect." Sophia hesitated at the door. "Dinner is at 6. Cole, my Cole, has questions, as you might imagine. I've told him what I thought appropriate for his age, but he's a curious boy. Sharp, too." "Like his mother," Cole observed. A shadow crossed her face. "And his father. Jesse's intelligence was one of the things that attracted me to him before I understood how he was using it." She sighed. "I've tried to be honest with Cole about Jesse, the good and the bad. He knows his father made serious mistakes, but wasn't an evil man." "That seems fair," Cole acknowledged, though the mention of Jesse still stirred complicated emotions. "And what have you told him about me, about why I was away?" "The truth, as much as he can understand it. That you did wrong things once, but paid for them, and that you protected us when we needed it most." Sophia met his gaze directly. "I don't believe in building a life on lies, Xavier. Not anymore." The use of his chosen name rather than his birth name felt significant, an acknowledgement of the man he had tried to become rather than the outlaw he had been. "Nor do I," he agreed quietly. "Thank you for everything you've done. For the ranch, for the boy. For me." "We're even now," she said simply. "Your sacrifice gave us this life. It seemed only right to ensure you had a place in it when the time came." As she turned to leave, Cole called after her softly, "Sophia is there. That is, should I know if there's someone, a man in your life?" The question had haunted him throughout his imprisonment, the possibility that Sophia might find companionship, perhaps even love, during his long absence. She paused in the doorway, something unreadable flickering across her features. "There have been suitors," she admitted. "Widowers mostly looking for a mother for their children, or a woman to run their household. I declined their offers." "Because of the ranch?" Cole asked carefully. "Because none of them were you," she replied with quiet frankness. Then, before he could respond, she added, "Rest now. There will be time for us to talk more later." With that, she was gone, leaving Cole to contemplate her words and the future they might portend. A future that suddenly held possibilities he had scarcely dared to imagine during his years behind bars. As summer gave way to autumn, Cole gradually reintegrated into life at Blackwood Ranch. The adjustment was not without challenges. 7 years of institutionalization had left their mark. He startled at sudden movements, woke at the slightest sound, and found the vastness of the Montana sky almost overwhelming after the confined horizons of prison. But there were joys, too simple pleasures. He had nearly forgotten the taste of fresh-baked bread, the scent of pine forests after rain, the sight of stars scattered across the night sky like diamonds on black velvet. He worked from sunrise to sunset, rebuilding his strength and relearning the rhythms of ranch life under Miguel's patient guidance. Young Cole Robert became his shadow, full of questions about horses, cattle, and the early days of the ranch. The boy's curiosity was insatiable, his energy boundless. Cole found himself sharing knowledge he hadn't realized he possessed: how to read weather from cloud patterns, how to gentle a nervous colt, how to find north without a compass. "Were you really an outlaw?" the boy asked one evening as they repaired tack in the barn. "Like in the dime novels," Cole set down the bridle he was mending, considering his response carefully. "I was," he admitted finally. "But it wasn't like the stories. It was desperate and dangerous and wrong." "Is that why you went to prison? To make up for being wrong?" "Yes." Cole nodded. "That's exactly why." The boy absorbed this with the solemnity that was so characteristic of him. "Mama says everyone deserves a second chance. They truly want to change." "Your mother is a wise woman," Cole replied. "Wiser than most." "She cried when the letter came saying you were coming home," Cole Robert confided. "Not sad crying. The other kind." The revelation caught Cole off guard. Despite the warmth of his welcome, Sophia had maintained a certain reserve in their daily interactions. Friendly, but careful, as if testing the boundaries of their new relationship. "Your mother has worked very hard to build this ranch," he said finally. "I imagine she was relieved to have another pair of hands to help." The boy shook his head with the certainty of youth. "It wasn't that. She said, 'He's coming home, Cole. After all this time, he's finally coming home.' And then she hugged me real tight." Something shifted in Cole's chest, a loosening of doubt he hadn't realized he still carried. He turned back to the bridle, blinking away unexpected moisture from his eyes. "Well, I'm glad to be home. Very glad indeed." As autumn deepened, the ranch prepared for winter hay, stored cattle, moved to sheltered pastures, repairs made to buildings that would soon face Montana's unforgiving weather. Cole threw himself into the work, grateful for the physical exertion that left him too exhausted for the nightmares that still occasionally plagued him. One evening, after young Cole had been tucked into bed and the hands had retired to the bunkhouse, Cole sat on the porch, watching the first snowflakes of the season drift lazily through the lantern light. The door opened behind him, and Sophia emerged, wrapped in a thick shawl against the chill. "Room for one more?" she asked, gesturing to the bench where he sat. "Always," he replied, shifting to make space beside him. She settled next to him, her shoulder brushing against his, a casual contact that nonetheless sent warmth through him despite the cold. "The boy's asleep?" Cole asked. Finally, he wanted one more story about the early days of the ranch. Sophia smiled fondly. "Your story's not mine. He's quite taken with you." "He's an exceptional child," Cole said. "You've raised him well." "I've tried." She pulled her shawl closer as a gust of wind scattered snowflakes across the porch. "Sometimes I wonder what Jesse would think of him." The mention of Jesse no longer carried the sting it once had. Time had mellowed the guilt, if not erased it entirely. "He'd be proud," Cole said with certainty. Whatever his faults, Jesse loved fiercely. He would have adored his son. Sophia nodded, her gaze distant. "I've made peace with Jesse's memory over the years, the good and the bad. He wasn't the man I thought I married, but he gave me Cole, and for that, I'm grateful." They sat in companionable silence for a time, watching the snow begin to blanket the ranch yard in white. It was Sophia who finally broke the quiet. "When you first brought me here all those years ago, did you ever imagine this?" she asked, gesturing to the prosperous ranch around them. "Not in my wildest dreams," Cole admitted. "I was just trying to do one right thing in a life full of wrong ones." "And now, what are you trying to do now, Xavier?" The question caught him off guard. "Now, I suppose I'm trying to be useful, to earn my place here." Sophia turned to face him, her expression serious in the lantern light. "You don't need to earn anything. This ranch is as much yours as mine, more, really. You built it from nothing. You made it thrive, he countered gently. You and Miguel and the hands. I was just absent. Not by choice. Her hand found his on the bench between them. And not forgotten. Never that. The touch of her fingers against his sent a jolt through Cole's body, a reminder of feelings he had carefully suppressed during his years in prison, believing them futile. Slowly giving her every chance to withdraw, he turned his hand to clasp hers. "Sophia," he began, uncertain how to express the tumult of emotions her simple touch had unleashed. "I don't expect— that is, I wouldn't presume." She silenced him with a gentle squeeze of his hand. "When you were sentenced, I thought I'd lost everything a second time," she said softly. "First Jesse, then you. But then I realized something important. Jesse was taken from me, but you sacrificed yourself for us, willingly, knowing the cost." "I had debts to pay," Cole replied. "To Jesse, to the law, to my own conscience. And now, are the debts paid?" He considered the question seriously. "Some, not all. I'm not sure such debts can ever be fully settled." "Perhaps not," Sophia acknowledged. "But at some point, we have to allow ourselves to live again, not just atone." She turned her face up to his snowflakes catching in her lashes. "I've waited 7 years to ask you this question, Xavier Blackwood. Are you ready to live again? With us, with me?" The directness of her question, the hope and vulnerability it revealed, humbled him. This remarkable woman, who had every reason to despise him for his deceptions and his role in her husband's demise, was instead offering him a future he had scarcely dared to imagine. "I am," he answered, his voice rough with emotion. "If you'll have me, Sophia, there's nothing I want more." Her smile was like the sunrise breaking over the mountains, gradual, then radiant. "Then kiss me, Xavier. It's been far too long." Under a gentle curtain of falling snow, Cole Blackwood drew Sophia into his arms and kissed her tenderly at first, then with increasing passion, as years of separation and longing found release. When they finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I never thought I'd have this chance again," he whispered. "Neither did I," she replied. But the path of redemption sometimes leads to unexpected destinations. As they sat together, watching the snow transform the landscape into something new and pristine, Cole reflected on the strange journey that had brought him to this moment. From outlaw to rancher, from fugitive to prisoner, and now to this, a man granted a second chance at life, at love, at family. The path forward would not be without challenges. There would be questions from young Cole as he grew older and understood more of his complex heritage. There would be those in the community who would never fully trust a former criminal. And there would be Cole's own ongoing struggle with the ghosts of his past. But as Sophia's head came to rest against his shoulder, Cole Blackwood knew with certainty that whatever difficulties lay ahead, they would face them together. The trail of redemption had led him home at last to the ranch he had built, the woman he loved, and the future he had almost lost. And that was enough. More than enough.